The City of Nashua Zoning Board of Adjustment, and this is the October 25th, 2022 Zoning Board meeting. This evening's meeting will be conducted in a hybrid format. The meeting is accessible in person in the third floor auditorium of the Nashua City Hall, 229 Main Street, and via Zoom at the link posted in all public meeting agendas. Attendance via telephone is available using the Zoom connection details. Minutes of tonight's meeting, as well as audio and video recordings, will be available later at nashuanh.gov/agenda center. You would just need to select the Zoning Board of Adjustment. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting, please call 603-589-3056 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. The chair is in control of the proceedings and calls upon all who wish to speak in order as their raised hands are observed. The board follows the meeting protocols and procedures identified in its bylaws. The applicant will present their case for 15 minutes, followed by questions by the board. Next persons wishing to speak in favor or with questions or opposition will be asked to speak for up to 5 minutes. If there are questions or opposition, the applicant will have 5 minutes to present a response. Finally, one and only one person with questions or an opposition will be permitted to speak again before the board deliberates and determines an outcome. A timer is used to manage speaking time. Kate Poirier, our zoning board coordinator, will notify us when 1 minute is remaining, and again when the speaker's time has expired. If you are participating by Zoom and wish to speak when public input is requested, please use the raise hand option, which can be found under reactions on a computer or the more menu on a phone. The chair will call you in turn. Please use the lower hand option when you have completed your questions and comments. Please mute your microphone until called on to speak. Note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. Tonight we will be hearing requests for deviation from the Nashua Zoning Code in the form of applications for special exemptions and or variances. A special exception is a request that seeks permission to do something that the zoning ordinance permits only under special circumstances. To grant a special exception, 5 points of law are required to be met. These are outlined in the application and will be summarized in board motions. A variance is a request that seeks permission to do something that the ordinance does not permit. Variances also have 5 points of law to be met, different from those for special exceptions. Per the City of Nashua bylaws and State of New Hampshire revised statutes, a minimum of 3 or more affirmative votes are required to approve any application. In addition, this board will hear all scheduled cases if a quorum of 3 voting board members is present at the meeting. Any citizen has the right to contest the decision that this board makes. Should we render a decision that you believe is in error, you have the right to request a rehearing. A written rehearing request must be received by the City of Nashua Planning Department within 30 calendar days from the date of decision. Should this board not grant a rehearing request, you can file an appeal directly to the New Hampshire Superior Court. Please contact Mr. Falk of the Planning Department for more information. For this meeting, we have the following full board members in attendance. Myself, Mary Ellen McKay, the chair, Steve Lionel, who is our vice chair, Jack Currier, who is our clerk, J.P. Boucher, and Mr. Rob Shaw. We also have the following alternate members in attendance. Mr. Jay Mancara, Ms. Estafia Boras, who is here via Zoom, and we have a brand new member we all want to welcome, Mr. Josh Nahili. In addition to our board members, we also have with us Mr. Carter Falk of the Deputy Planning Manager, Ms. Kate Poirier, our zoning coordinator, and Mr. Sullivan could not be here this evening. I'd like to start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. And for board members who are participating by Zoom, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you, which is required under the right to know law, and state your reason for not attending in person. Mr. Steve Lionel.
Present.
Mr. Jack Currier.
Present.
Mr. J.P. Boucher.
Present.
Mr. Rob Shaw.
Present.
Mr. Jay Mancara.
Present.
Mrs. Staffia Boras?
I'm present. I was delayed at my office, and I'm actually alone in my office.
Thank you. And Mr. Josh Nahaley?
Present.
Thank you. I will now read, Mr. Falk, are there any changes to our agenda this evening?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. Then I will read our first case into the record.
I think there is a change.
I don't, well,
No, maybe not. Okay, never mind.
okay. The owner, MPAC Corporation, City of Nashua. Applicant, Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director, City of Nashua. MPAC Corporation, City of Nashua, owner, master tenant, Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director, City of Nashua. Applicant, 201 Main Street and 78-84 West Pearl Street. Sheet 81, Lot 3. Requesting the following variances from Land Use Code Section 190-97. 1, to allow 6 wall-mounted electronic message center signs, 1 facing Main Street, 5 facing West Pearl Street, where they are not permitted in the D-1 MU zone. 2, to allow symbols, graphics, and images for each EMC sign where 3 lines of text only are allowed. 3, to exceed 50% of the area of the sign to be the EMC portion, 100% proposed for all EMC signs. And 4, from Land Use Code Section 190-108 D2, to exceed maximum wall sign height of 20 feet, 24.5 proposed for EMC sign facing Main Street. 5, from Land Use Code Section 190-108 C6, to exceed maximum wall sign area 100 square feet permitted, 112 square feet proposed on Main Street. And 6, from Land Use Code Section 190-108E1, to exceed maximum number of wall signs per business, 3 permitted, a total of 7 wall signs proposed, 2 on Main Street, 5 on West Pearl Street. All requests for new Nashua Center for the Arts, D-1 MU Zone Ward 4. This was tabled from the October 11th meeting. Mr. Falk, does this from Mr. Sullivan get read now, or
I think that's just
after we decide?
That's just an FYI item.
Just an FYI item, so it doesn't, okay. I just wanted to make sure.
And Madam Chair, if I may, I'll be recusing myself from this case.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mancara. Is there somebody here to present this case? Please.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Tim Cummings.
Oh,
the
hi,
Director of
Tim.
Economic Development. I'm participating virtually this evening.
Okay, thank you. And we have somebody here also, so I assume they will be helping you?
Yes, that's correct. I'm actually going to limit my participation this evening due to the virtual nature of this participation. But with us this evening, we have Rich Lannon of NPAC Corporation, Ned Collier, the architect of record, and then most importantly, Pete Lally, who is the contract service provider known as the operator for the Nashua Center for the Arts. I believe at the last meeting, there was some very specific questions that arose, and obviously wanting to provide as much information as possible. Thought it was best to continue the conversation to this evening where we could specifically address the various questions at hand, specifically with Pete Lally. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it off now. I will stay in the background. Obviously, if needed, I can come back on and answer any question that arises specifically. So I'm not sure if Rich or Ned is going to lead the conversation off, but I will hand it over to those folks over at the lectern.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Mr. Cummings. And if you would please state your name and address for the record as you approach the mic in order to speak.
I'd be happy to. My name is Richard Lannon. I live at 11 McGrath Road in Pelham. I'm the president of NPAC Corp., which is the applicant along with the city of Nashua, as Director Cummings has said. And I wasn't sure if Director Cummings was going to be on Zoom, so he pretty much said it for me. I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to come back this evening. I know 2 weeks ago, during your debate, there was just a lot of questions, even though Ned Colley, the architect, was able to explain some things. A lot of the questions seem to stem from the operational side and what the signboard on Main Street and what the signboards on West Pearl Street are going to do. And we didn't want to put words in the operator's mouth, so we brought him here this evening. So, I'm here, again, like Tim had said, Ned Collier, the architect, is here again, if there's questions for either one of us or Director Cummings. But more importantly, I want to introduce Pete Lally, who's the president of Spectacle Live, who's the one that has been under contract, has been involved since the very beginning of this planning process. And I think you'll find that he'll be able to explain more and be able to answer whatever questions you have regarding the actual operations of the sign. So, Pete?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here, and as was mentioned.
Mr. Lally, could you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. Peter Lally, and I'm at 47 Bartlett Street in Massachusetts, Andover, Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing the opportunity. If we can bring up the PowerPoint, I can give you a little bit of background on Spectacle Live. As Mr. Lannon said, we've been involved with the project for about the last 5 years or so, pretty much since the beginning. We operate in a number of venues and are involved with a number of venues throughout New England, 9 different performing arts centers in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. You can advance the next slide. Spectacle Live was started about 10 years ago, and we offer full service management of venues, booking, marketing, production, ticketing, and so forth, kind of the 360 degrees of venue management. Again, just to refresh, I know you're familiar with these pictures, but the building itself and the signage on the left side there of the building being one of the proposed signs, and the others along West Pearl Street there. And a few notes about the signage and just in terms of performing arts centers and regular practice in the industry. One of the things that's really exciting about the design of this performing arts center is its modern look, the aesthetic of it. Kudos to Ned and his team for doing an amazing job. It's been just a pleasure to be there is to see them put this together. And part of that approach was to have kind of a different look. There's a lot of traditional performing arts centers and restored theaters and so forth throughout New England, but this is definitely a statement of a different kind in terms of the modern building that's been presented. And okay. And in presenting it, it's a theater marquee that does have a lot less light pollution than some others. I'll show you some other examples that are a little bit different. The technology involved makes the signage easily controllable, dimmable. From a content perspective, there's a lot of ease of change and so forth. And really from the standpoint of venues and performing arts centers, to have some type of signage and recognizing kind of bringing what's outside or what's inside the theater to the outside is a fairly standard practice by way of informing the public, by way of wayfinding, so people from out of town can easily recognize the facility. And also we get a lot of requests from artists on the day of the show that their presence there that evening be recognized. You'd never guess that artists like to see their name in lights, so that's part of what we deal with as well. And like I said, it is a fairly typical practice for performing arts centers to have this type of exterior signage. I can give you some examples of not only venues that we're involved in, but some others in the region. We do manage the Colonial Theater in Laconia, New Hampshire, a beautifully restored vaudeville theater that was originally built in 1914. This is the signage that is outside of the Colonial. It isn't digital signage, but it is a blade sign, and it has individual letters, not discrete, much more of a bigger statement, a lot of kind of light pollution in the area that isn't a part of the NCA's signage package. The Rex Theater, newly restored in Manchester, New Hampshire, that has both light box and blade signage on it, as well as the Bank of New Hampshire stage, which recently opened in Concord, New Hampshire, which has both blade signage and some substantial digital signage on the outside. And again, to look at the NCA in terms of its overall presentation and the amount of space dedicated to the signage is fairly discreet. But it does accomplish, as I mentioned before, what we would hope to accomplish with the signage and being able to kind of bring some semblance of the activity inside to the outside and to be able to present the theater and have it recognized as such as people are in the area. To give you an idea, I'll give you an idea of the type of use we would anticipate, but also that we understand that Nashua has some limitations on the number of seconds that a sign can be there. I believe it's 5. We would look to extend that. Most common practice is around 8 seconds or more per image. We would look to do static images only, so not video rolls, and used only to publicize events at the NCA. So we wouldn't be using this for sponsor recognition or other uses, just to be able to inform folks about what is going on at the theater. And some examples of what we might do. These are not real artists that we've booked yet. I don't want to propose that, but these are some artists that we've worked with at other venues, and to give you an idea of what we would anticipate should the signs be approved, the type of use. So being able to put the artist name, an artist image, and simply the date between up on the signs, and be able to bring, like I said, a presence to what's going on stage at the NCA. If I can answer any questions or bring more information about any of what our thoughts of uses are or standard practices of other venues, I'd be happy to do that.
Does any member of the board have any questions? Ms. Boras, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Thank you.
I have one.
Mr. Boucher?
Can you just refresh us on the box office sign? Why the size, the reason that you're using it for, what you're displaying on that sign, the one that will be on Main Street?
Sure. So we would anticipate displaying, much like we've shown here, the artist's image, the date, the name of the artist, and have that the content not only on the front box office, but similar to what we'd also do on West Pearl Street. But
Okay, so it may, that whole sign may be just a display of the artist and the date. Are you displaying any other upcoming shows or any events on that sign?
yeah, whatever the events calendar would be, we would anticipate. Usually we like to put out maybe a 3 to 4 week package together that would roll through, like I said, at least an 8 second per image, and kind of give an upcoming events of what's coming up at the theater.
Okay, so in the last meeting we had, it was mentioned that a potential alternative to the signage, the electronic sign, would be a marquee, more traditional marquee. But it was mentioned that size may be, nothing is proposed, right? So what I'm just saying is that you would be looking maybe on that second story that you would have to display something longer, almost. I don't know what was said, half the width of the building, 3/4 of the width of the building, I don't know. But what is the alternative to the electronic sign just over the box office? What would the alternative be?
I guess to give you kind of two different answers to that. One, if it was actually a marquee, I'd probably turn that to Ned's discussion about the architecture of the building and what if it was a fixed marquee. In terms of temporary signage or something along those lines, there have been cases at other venues that we manage where vinyl banners or something were used for kind of temporary recognition of upcoming events. So that is an option. I think with such a brand new, nice looking building, I would hesitate to do that because I would hate to hang a piece of vinyl on such a beautiful new building. I just don't think it represents the building well and kind of hides all of Ned's work. So the alternative would perhaps, Ned, I don't know if you have any comments on what structurally would be different, or, I don't know.
Please speak in the mic.
Mr. Lally, it might be easier if you pick up the mic, just take it off there, because they're losing you on the recording.
Oh, okay.
And we need
Is
to
that better?
have you. And when this gentleman speaks, please state your name and address for the record.
So I'm Ned Collier, 51 Burroughs Street, Boston, Massachusetts. So just quickly to reiterate what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, we were speculating, and I think subsequent conversations with Pete and his crew have emphasized that where the digital board is, it's unlikely they would hang a banner there. It would be difficult to manage that. The balcony rail that you can see along Main Street is a much more easily accessed area where they might choose to hang a banner. Likely would be linear along the length of the rail rather than hanging over the building signage. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that would be an option. Like I said, to be honest, I'd rather not hang vinyl off of that beautiful new building. But that certainly would be an option. It is something that we've done at other venues from time to time on a temporary basis to be able to put something there. And in terms of that area being conducive to be able to take it in, take it out, secure it properly, et cetera, that probably would be the best option, to do more of a wider strip of a banner. But again, you'd have one static image that would be there. Wouldn't give us the opportunity, like I said, typically, ideally, we'd like to be able to rotate the next 3 or 4 weeks of things that were going on at the NCA throughout that signage. So that would be an option, one that we would certainly explore if the digital signage wasn't an option, but I think that the digital signage and its capabilities are far superior.
So how would you control, or what's your plan to control the signage on Main Street as far as is it lit 24 hours a day? Again, I think you mentioned not more than 8 seconds for the display. Do you anticipate that display will be changing every 8 seconds? Just trying to get an idea of what you envision that sign to be.
Yeah, I know the city, from what I understand, has must be static for at least 5 seconds. Typically, when we've had other signage, we've done it for at least 8, and sometimes longer. And certainly, we'd be open to going longer if that was more agreeable to the city. We want to give a chance to have that image up there and have people take it in. And as far as the overall cycle of it throughout the day, with this type of signage, it's automatically dimmable, so it doesn't project too much in the evening and make too much of a splash in terms of light pollution. But if there were restrictions to have that only on for parts of the day, or have it not rotate for parts of the day or something, we certainly would understand if that was something that we would need to do. But ideally, we'd like to be able to put those images up there and rotate them throughout the 24-hour period.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lionel.
Couple of questions. First, regarding the signs on West Pearl Street. It's, traditionally, these are just fixed signs inside, they're inside the glass, right? Inside
Yes.
the window. And so having them be EMCs is a bit unusual. Is there a reason that you can't just, have printed signs that hang from frames that are illuminated with a lamp, as is typical?
No, that's certainly something that, as you mentioned, a lot of performing arts centers do have that type of signage. I think the advantage of signage that are the EMC displays is that we can just promote more of the events that are going on. The static images of a printed poster would be something we might change out once a month, whereas being able to rotate and really bring some publicity to all of the types of events that are going on in the coming weeks or month is something that certainly would be more advantageous.
The reason I ask is, of course, you're asking for 6 variances and some very significant asks, as we call it, with graphics and EMC at all. I'm trying to think of, if there are options for at least cutting down the overall ask that might make it more palatable, because right now it doesn't quite seem a good fit for me for Nashua. Regarding the box office sign, I didn't hear mention of a more traditional back illuminated sign. I think you called it a blade sign. I don't mean the kind with letters that you stick up, but usually they have some sort of graphic and text that are back illuminated that I've seen in theaters. I think some of your examples had that.
Yeah, kind of the light box type of approach with the lighting in the back. That is something, as you mentioned, that is used at a lot of performing arts centers. The challenge about that particular location over the box office is the accessibility to change it out. So there's really no access to that particular part of the building other than with a bucket truck or something like that to switch out a poster. So from a practical standpoint, it would be a challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
Mr. Courier.
One of the struggles I've had with electronic changing signs is the brightness and the lack of quantification of how bright that is. I remember I used to work out in Jaffrey, and I would drive through New Ipswich, and it was a bank or a realtor or something put in a sign, and it was, I was aghast at how it illuminated the whole center of New Ipswich, and I would read in the Telegraph, because it was printed back then, and they covered New Ipswich, it really was aggravating a lot of people in the town, those that lived near it and those that drove by it. And as time went on, there was a response saying, well, we've dimmed it down. Well, I don't know, got to tell you, I still thought it was like really bright. And so I appreciate, maybe say some concessions you had listed there about like the 5-second, and you've talked about automatically dimmable, but is there any quantification you can put on that? And how can a guy like me get a handle that doesn't allow something that's so bright that the same thing happens, that people aren't happy with it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I hear you. There's a lot of theaters that are, they lit up like a Christmas tree. They're kind of overkill. A couple things with this sign. One, the overall size of it in terms of the presence of the building. I believe it's 7 feet by 8 feet or thereabouts. So not a huge representation in terms of its overall projection and presence, but still a sign of that size can throw some light. The company that we're working with has done quite a few of these types of performance venue signage pieces, and that's something that is controllable with this type of technology, is to bring that down in the evening, have it be either controlled by kind of its own sensor, or to program it to be less bright as is called, as the sun goes down, and it's not as bright as it would be during the day. So those are certainly controllable. If there's certain metrics that we would be asked to stick to, I'm sure that we could work with the signage company to achieve that.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
I'm Ned Collier, 51 Burroughs Street. I think one of the things that the board might want to consider is that we look at the ambient light level on Main Street at night, and one potential limitation the board could place is that this sign would not exceed the existing ambient light level. So we would come out, we would meter the street in the evening and at night when you have the greatest concern, and set the light level of the sign so that it did not exceed the overall ambient light level of Main Street.
Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair.
I think the only question that I have, and I don't know, Mr. Lally, if this is for you or Mr. Collier, when you speak about the ambient light, I worry about street lights and people getting confused if something's flashing every 8 seconds. Is that going to be a distraction?
And that's something that certainly, like I said, 8 seconds has been something that we have typically used, but, certainly if that needed to be extended, that would be something we'd be amenable to. To have an image up there and just to be able to rotate it. The biggest advantage to us is not having to reprint physical materials, hang them on the building, and to be able to rotate that through and really with ease be able to represent what's coming up over the week. So the number of seconds, I'm not looking to, tell me 30 seconds, I'm okay, or more. It's more about being able to easily represent a calendar of events over the course of a number of weeks without physically hanging it on the building, physically reprinting, et cetera. So if there's concerns about that 8-second, like I said, that's something we've typically done in other places. For instance, where we got that practice was roadside billboards with companies that have digital boards on Route 93 and so forth. They're an 8-second rotation. So that was kind of a practice that we got into because of that. But like I say, if there's concern to extend that, our biggest the biggest benefit to the NCA is the fact that we could, again, just be putting out a number of weeks of events on these signs versus the more static, physically printed signs.
Thank you, and I'm assuming it's a cost factor also. It would
That
be
too,
much
yep.
more. It would be much more expensive.
Much more cost effective as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I've got a few things, and I'll follow up on that topic for a moment. Is it possible in the transition from one display to the next to have essentially a soft dim, go to even black, and come back on soft? Because one of my concerns in general with that, and I appreciate that you reference like the boards on like I-93 and all, but those are very distracting to me. When you've got 8 seconds and you're driving, and I realize you're driving a lot faster than hopefully anybody is down Main Street. But I do have a general concern that if something's going every 8 seconds and you're coming down Main Street and it's changing, I know 8 seconds is a long time in some regards, but so I would definitely, depending on where this goes, be much more in favor of it being a fairly long, more static display. But I think especially the transition, when something goes from one bright image to another that's very different, that still can be the kind of thing that catches your eye and is distracting. So is that technology available to do essentially a soft transition?
Yeah, these boards, and that is a good point in terms of that quick reaction of one image that has one color palette to another and kind of being stark. Certainly these boards have that capability easily enough to make them dim out that image, come to black or nearly, and then bring the other one up. So these boards are very capable of all that and more.
Okay. And then another thing I wanted to explore is, and my fellow board members know this and others that have seen me talk about this, I have a lot of issues with the idea of approving any graphical electronic messaging sign because we've never allowed that by code in this city. So that's a huge ask for me. But one of the things that, depending again where conversation goes, and at least if I can even influence some of what the board's will is, if there is a will to do this, is it reasonable from your standpoint of usage, to consider or be able to live within, I should say, essentially, I'll call it like kind of a nod back to what the existing sign ordinance allows on EMCs, where we only allow 3 lines of text, and again, that 5-second changing rule. So I'm looking at it as, okay, what if I just try to kind of go, instead of it being like a black background, now there's an image of an artist or whatever, but limiting that any text that's going to be on the display is going to be no more than 3 lines of text. And certainly, I think you've already said it would definitely meet that 5-second changing rate. But so I have some concern that, you have an artist and then you've got, I don't know, 7 lines of text and there's a lot of stuff there. I realize that might not be the real intent normally, but I'd like to understand if you see any issue living within that kind of limitation.
No, we're not trying to put up an event program on there. We're just, recognizing the time we have for somebody walking by to look at it is, we're just trying to convey who the artist is and when they're going to be there. So we don't even have to go through who, what, when, where, why. It's just who and when. They know where. So certainly having just that, and that's much like the display, those images that I showed earlier, just a date and the artist's name in the image or logo of the band is kind of what we would be looking to project.
Okay, because I could see, like, you could have the, show times. Maybe there's a matinee in an evening, or maybe it's on Saturday and Sunday, or there's a discount for kids. You could put a lot of information on.
Yeah,
I appreciate
and
that.
especially on that size of a board, which is only roughly 7 by 8 feet, that there's not a lot of you could, given the distance that you would be even standing on the ground looking up at it, the font size of the text is such that you'd have to be pretty generous with that size and the overall board, so there wouldn't be really much of an opportunity to be effective in the messaging if it was more than just date, artist name.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I guess I'd-
Thank you, Mr. Courier.
Back to the Pearl Street signs, or the 6 signs. One thing I don't remember covering, I don't think we did, but was the intent to have all 6 of those displaying the same thing at the same time, or was it going to be something different on each one at each moment? Like this is 1 week out, this one's 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, or was it the same image? What's the proposal on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question in terms of, would we represent more than one thing at a time? Our initial thought is that the technology is there to be able to do that, to be able to do one after the other. If it was the board's wish to keep those all as one static image, we could do that much the same as we would do on the front. Ideally, it would be nice to have a different upcoming event on each, but certainly if that's a concern or distraction, having an image that's static. And actually, there's a lot of merit to that, too, if someone's walking by to be able to kind of absorb from each of the signs. So it would be more preferable to do different signs in each one, but certainly there's a lot of value if we were to need to stick to just one image per all 6.
All right, thanks.
Madam Chair, Mr. Falk had a comment.
Madam Chair, a couple of points. Mr. Courier just mentioned the 5 signs on West Pearl Street. The ordinance wouldn't even count them. We don't even count them as a sign if they're 12 inches or more in back of the window. And I think they're about 9 inches back. The team could correct me on it. But if they're 12 inches or more back, they wouldn't even be here for a variance for those, or even a sign permit. So that's one issue. Another issue I wanted to talk to about is what Mr. Shaw mentioned about the images fading from one image to another. In the ordinance, in the EMC ordinance, it's 190-97B4. It states that changes from one message to another shall be accomplished with the provision that the sign may change to complete darkness and then re-illuminate to the new message. So it doesn't have anything in the middle. So one is there, it disappears, and then another one comes back on. So there's not supposed to be anything in between. Thank you.
And I saw
Yeah, I had another.
Mr. Shaw, then Mr. Courier,
One
and
of
then
the-
Mr. Lionel.
One of the other things that in your PowerPoint, there was a comment regarding, or a parenthetical comment regarding the video for the image. And it was something to the effect of striving not to, or, it seemed like there was a little bit of an out being left. And I realized as I kind of was thinking about this question just now again, I don't know if that was the idea of fade in and fade out, or if you were really contemplating that you wanted to leave some possibility that there might be some reason why there would be video or animation of some sort that was foreseen, because it definitely seemed like that was in there, and I really wanted to understand that.
No, the video boards are capable of video animation, but that's not the ask.
Okay,
Static images is what the ask is.
thank you.
Mr. Courier,
No, I didn't have another question.
you're okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Lionel.
Okay, building on that, would you be willing to accept a stipulation in the variance prohibiting video or animation of the images?
Yes, yeah, our ask is for the static images and understanding that video in that application would be potentially distracting to drivers and so forth, so static images would be just fine.
So adding to what Mr. Shaw was saying, we get many, many, many requests for EMCs with graphics. And we deny them all, and it doesn't stop the businesses from putting graphics and moving pictures on their EMCs, so, which is kind of frustrating. I'm really not happy about sort of breaking that precedent of allowing graphics on an EMC, because then we'll probably get flooded with more requests for that. Well, you did it for them, why don't you do it for us? And although we are supposed to take each case individually, it makes it harder. And as I said the last time, I wish people would approach the Board of Aldermen and see about changing the ordinance if there are enough businesses that really want to use graphics on their EMCs. Because one of the things that we're supposed to do in terms of the points of law are within spirit and intent of the ordinance. And if you have something that is just sort of blatantly against what the ordinance says, then why are we here? I just wanted to mention about thinking about driving down Main Street and having a sign that's 20 feet up in the air with changing. I think that would be really quite distracting to drivers. I mean, certainly foot traffic can look up, at least maybe if you're across the street, if you're on the side of the street where the west side of the street, you might not even be able to see it properly. But I worry that it would possibly lead to some distracted driving accidents in there. So that's my thought. Mr. Falk had a good point, which is something I was wondering about, because typically when we talk about EMCs, they're externally mounted, and what you're proposing are these EMCs that are actually inside the building behind the window. And I wasn't aware of the particular distance at which we have no say in the matter. And I might suggest that you consider using that, because otherwise I have to wonder about having EMCs, 5 of them on West Pearl Street.
Well, it is 6.
Oh, it says 5. It's 5 facing West Pearl Street.
6 total EMCs.
There's 6 total, no,
okay.
6 total, 7 total signs,
Okay.
6 total EMCs.
All right, got it.
And there's, the 7th sign is the one that says Nashua Center for the Arts, or whatever it says, so. Anyway, so that's sort of my thought at this point.
So I might address the West Pearl Street
Sure.
signage question. If we pull them the full 12 inches back, it triggers accessibility requirements that would require the signs to be floor mounted, so that somebody who had a cane, for example, would be able to strike the sort of base of the sign, because hanging from the ceiling, the bottom of the sign, if it's 12 inches out, it violates the accessibility code in that regard. Given the relative narrowness of what we call the West Pearl Street concourse along that edge, we were hoping to be able to sort of hang them from the ceiling relatively close to the glass, so that we could preserve the floor space and not trigger the accessibility requirements. It's possible that if the alternative for Pete was none at all, he might find it acceptable to go with the floor mount 12 inches inside the glass. But when we presented those options some months ago, the preference was to see if we could do a ceiling hung unit.
And let me ask Mr. Falk, does that rule about 12 inches, would that also apply to just ordinary printed signs that are just have a lamp illuminating them?
Yes, it's really any sign that's 12 inches or more back. We don't really count it. And if you walk up and down Main Street or any of the commercial corridors throughout the city, you'll see large, not only signs, but other items that identify what a business advertises or sells or has for sale. So if everything is 12 inches back, we don't even count it as a sign or permit or anything, or any signage.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of businesses with scrolling LED signs in their windows of pizza places and.
Like the open signs and the hour signs.
Right.
Well, I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
But does the ordinance allow for that, or is it just done and we ignore it?
I would have to say that I would not like to get anybody in trouble for that, since it's not really before us, but I think you know where I'm heading, so.
Okay.
There are a lot of times just put up, a lot of times,
Yes.
a company such as a soda company or a potato chip company, they offer the signs for free, because part of the sign on the bottom may indicate their company on it, so that's why they do them.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Now, you see dress shops with dresses all throughout all throughout the windows. You see car dealerships with cars all in the front. So as you drive by, you don't even need a sign on the face of the wall facade. You look in the windows and you see exactly what they're selling.
Yeah. And you see grocery stores that have their windows entirely covered in cigarette ads and.
And those are all
beer ads.
illegal too, so.
Yeah.
That's part of our code enforcement's responsibility, so.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please step forward and state your name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Paul. My name is Paul Murray, 164 Hayden Road in Hollis. I'm in favor, but I just want to give you one more thought. With all those signs dimming and coming back up, at least synchronize them so you don't have them blinking like an arcade. So if you have all 6 of them, one's going down, one's coming up in brightness, that would be as distracting as changing, because your eyes would be all over the place. So I think you ought to consider putting a stipulation that if you're having multiple signs, at least synchronize when you're changing them in that 9-second, 8-second, 5-second, whatever it is, at least they're all changing at the same time. Thank you.
Point well taken. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone on Zoom who
You're too close to the mic.
would like to speak in favor of the application? I don't see anybody. Do you see him clear? Is there anyone here who would like to speak with questions, comments, concerns, or opposition to this application? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak with questions, comments, concerns, or opposition to this application? I don't see any. Then I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Courier.
Me first. So I guess with, I feel the Nashua Center for the Arts sign, in and of itself, given the building, I feel that meets the criteria, the static sign on the middle. In terms of over the box office sign, the 7-ish by 8 feet, I think a sign of that size is reasonable, again, for the size of the building and the corner it's on, but I'm hung up on the graphics portion of that versus the 3 lines of text. Maybe I could be persuaded otherwise, but I just, Just for all the reasons that I and others have talked about, I'm concerned about what would come with that. And also, while I'm very, confident in, like Mr. Lawley's running or his organization's running of this facility, organizations come and go, and there's going to be someone else running it, inevitably, in my opinion. And do they have as much credibility to stick to the commitments as Mr. Lawley? What we've seen with other EMCs is no. Many have not stuck to that. So I'm hung up on the graphics on that, but I'm looking forward to other opinions. On the 5, thank you for straightening me out, 5 West Pearl Street signs, I mean, the idea of having an image of a sign on an EMC versus like a poster in a window, I mean, that's kind of compelling to me. The quantity of, in looking at 5 of those without a real clear picture of why there's 5, I guess I was feeling like maybe one at either end of the building, and you kind of got yourself covered, but I guess I could be perhaps convinced that 5 is needed. It just seems excessive to me, and I guess I'll hold it at that for now.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I'm in favor of the signage on Main Street for the National Performing Arts Center. The box office sign, again, my position is, in this case, that the applicant is offered some solutions that I think are important. Again, static display. We're going to, following the ordinance as written as for the EMCs for the changeover. I think there's a lot of value in taking the ambient light measurement off of Main Street. And if that has to be done with, or somebody with the city, I don't know how, but if that has to be done to ensure that, that we're doing that correctly, or that there's some witness there, I mean, however that has to be done. I think those are key things for that sign. Again, I find that obviously there are some limitations on that particular building. Again, it's a beautiful building. I think it's important for the city of Nashua to have that building. That's my opinion. But again, to me, maybe it's a little unreasonable to be, like I said, it's the scale of the building where it is. It's not a wide building, so the accessibility to, like the applicant says, to have to change posters over and over again. So I think that, again, my position is probably not unlike other conversations we've had about this, is that the way I look at it is it's just a modern version of putting up a paper poster or a vinyl poster. Again, I would rather have that than have vinyl banners being hung on the building. And then, are we talking about having lighting for that and all this stuff? So I think that, again, I would support that, that part of the variance with specific stipulations that I think can achieve what we're looking for. The 5 electronic signs on West Pearl Street, whether they're 9 inches, for me, whether they're 9 inches or 12 inches away from the window, which I know we're talking about whether or not a variance is needed or not, I think it's more important that this center is able to accommodate everybody. So we heard testimony that it may violate some of the accessibility, and I know that that has come up in other applications we've looked at, and we've considered that. Again, we don't have a lot of evidence of that, but I'm going to take their word that when they designed this, they could do that. And obviously, they stated that they could put a standing sign there. I don't think that, again, the street's a one-way street. I don't think it's a huge distraction. I think it's at a certain level and size that I don't think is a distraction, no less than if it was 12 inches or 20 inches from the glass. I think it would present the same way. So again, I think with certain stipulations, I think this could look really great, like maybe with synchronizing or however we feel that may be important to us. So again, I think that that's a reasonable request because I think it's achieving the same thing in other formats. It's just that they have ability to do some, changeover more often, wherever. And as Mr. Shaw said, I'd be more than happy to consider any length of time for changing over these. So again, it would end up maybe appearing as you drive by. I know the lights are long sometimes there, depending which way you're running, but it could appear sometimes that, it is all static displays. It's just like a poster was put up. So I think that I could support this application with certain stipulations.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel.
Okay. I don't have a problem with the fixed sign for the National Center of the Arts. I don't have a problem with the position and size of the sign above the box office. And I could even support that it being an EMC, but what I keep getting stuck on is having it allow graphics, given the very clear wording of the ordinance. And one of the points of law that we have to address is the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. And we've been talking all evening about other possibilities that may be inconvenient. They may not be as attractive, but they're certainly possible. And in fact, the applicant does these in some other facilities. I'm remembering an application from a jewelry store in South Nashua where they basically wanted to put up a fixed image color display for not just 8 seconds, but maybe for hours. But the ordinance says no. There was I'm having a hard time getting past that in terms of it being within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. I think I agree that it would look nice. For the signs on West Pearl, I could probably accept they're maybe changing once a day, because those sorts of signs are just, they're typically promoting something that's coming up in the future. There's no need for them to change on a frequent basis. But I understand that it's nice to be able to change them electronically. But I'm still stuck on what the words of the ordinance say. And as much as I hate to say it, the precedent it would set if we accepted the graphics tonight. That's all from me right now.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw.
I guess first I'm going to express a little bit of frustration, and that is that the city is part of this application. And I recognize that that doesn't mean that the city can just control whether or not code gets changed and all, but the city as an entity has a lot more influence, and I would have hoped, and perhaps it was pursued and we don't know about it, and I'm not going to pretend to know one way or the other, that investigation into changing the code to allow for some difference in these EMCs, to allow graphics, et cetera, might have been pursued. And I would have liked to have heard if that was indeed something that's been done. If it was and there wasn't a will to do it, I have a feeling it didn't get to the Board of Aldermen, that no legislation was submitted. Understand, I believe that the land use code is going to be going through some major revisions here very soon, if not already being undertaken. And I hope that this topic gets addressed there. So that's my little bit of soapbox to start off with. So I'm very much where Mr. Lionel is, and it's been my hang up for a long time on these, that I don't know how I get past within the spirit and intent of the ordinance to allow any graphical images on these EMCs. About the only thing I feel like I can come up with at the moment, and it's with a nod to the future, and I would say that we might want to make sure we even note that in whatever motions, if there is any sort of approval motion, that if the code changes that we haven't put a restriction on now, that might then not be needed in the future. So my thought is, in the interim, until there would perhaps be an ordinance change that could allow for some graphical, that we propose that the Art Center pursue a single static graphical image that is, maybe it's something essentially of logo background on the sign, on that large EMC sign, and that the text that's there is about an upcoming artist, about the date that they'll be performing, but there isn't an image of the artist. There isn't, an album cover or anything else that might be. And I think, and I want to go back and say for a moment, I think the proposal is great. I think I would love to see this done this way. I have no problem with the overall proposal, and I think it's the right thing to do. I just feel like this board's hands are tied to legitimately say that we believe we can allow graphics to happen on these signs. I lament also the number of signs that are out there in the city that are in complete violation, but that's a whole different topic, and it doesn't mean we can't or shouldn't address this current request. But I think about the only way I could see myself supporting the large EMC sign would be if we have that restriction on it at this point in time, that it's essentially like you're mounting a permanent sign with whatever logo of the entity is. I mean, it could just be a solid gray background or something, but perhaps it would be at least a logo for the Art Center, that kind of thing, and that until there is something else that allows for graphics, that's all that would be allowed to happen on that sign. I think it would be a shame to have it be that limiting in one sense, but I can't get past the legalese of this. And I'll just speak quickly to the other things. I think the rest of the proposal is fine as far as the height of the sign, the regular fixed sign. I think the small EMCs being back, as much as they are and being so close to being not needing a variance, I think that's a different thing. I appreciate, and I think I like your point though, Ms. Lionel, to have those be pretty static. So, a one-day rotation or something like that would, I think would be quite reasonable. But I guess that's where I've gotten to on this. But it's the same usual hang-up for me. So.
Thank you. Ms. Boras.
I don't think she's.
She doesn't appear to be on right now, Madam Chair.
Oh, she's not on?
No, not right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nahili.
I appreciate that the architect and that group has bent over backwards for us. Many questions that we've asked, they have certainly provided some options. I think everybody up here on the stage is probably a proponent of this center. We want it to look very professional. We want it to be a pearl of the community here. I think most of us are in agreement that the static Nashua Performance Center sign is fine. I think that the agreement is certainly going in the direction. I think everybody's going to agree to the West Pearl Street signage. I think that's going to look really neat, and I do like the thought of changing maybe once or twice a day. Having been to several performance centers, I know, you see one says Jerry Seinfeld on January 15th, the next one says Paula Ponestone, and those really shouldn't be rotating. I think we're probably going to get there. new to this board. I didn't realize there was so much of a background on large EMCs. Haven't been in Nashville for a long time now. I'm starting to think about some of the EMCs in the city. And based on the ordinance, it's going to be tough for us to approve that as is. And once again, I appreciate that these folks here have come up with some great thoughts on what we can do, the 8 seconds and fading to black and all kinds of good stuff there. Mr. Lionel has certainly presented some good facts here, that there's a good chance that the floodgates are going to open here. So it would be tough, in my opinion, to approve that EMC on the front as it's proposed now. But the other two signage areas I would think we should move forward with.
Thank you. And myself, I concur with all the statements that have been made. I worry about the distraction of that one sign, especially with people driving. It's just my own thought. And again, it is in direct opposition to the law. It's a little hard to adjust to that. The other signs, I agree with it staying more static. I agree with more stationary. I also understand that going back to the 12 inches might be an impediment if it's a small or a narrow walkway for somebody in a wheelchair. So I recognize the ADA compliance here and accessibility about wanting those signs the way they want them. And I concur with those, but like everyone else, that big sign that's going to have alternate views even if it was every 5 minutes, it's still going to be a different view. It's going to be flashing. And it's going to call attention because whether you want to or you don't, your eye's going to be drawn to it. And that may be enough of a distraction to cause an accident. And that's the fear. But again, it's in violation of the ordinance as written in the law. So, having stated all this, and all of us having stated all this, would somebody care to make a motion?
Might it be reasonable, Madam Chair, if we split off these motions because the variances requested are really quite different?
Could I jump in?
Yeah, Mr. Curry.
Mr. Courier.
Well, just in what you're saying, I see Mr. Falk had his hand up also for a moment, but I was going to say, from what I think I'm hearing the will of the board is that for variance 1, the 6 wall EMC signs, I think we're saying we're okay with that. And then on number 2, to allow symbols, graphics, and images, it would be a no on the Main Street sign and a yes on the 5 Pearl Street signs, but with changeover once a day. And then it's approval of 3, 4, 5, and 6, because those are size issues which we have said are okay. So I think I've got that right, but I just wanted to gauge what we're looking at here.
I would be okay with that.
Yes, so would I. And we'd also want to consider, I think, in the stipulations, if it's going to change once a day, everybody changes at the same time. You don't have a deviation, a varied change, because that would cause a little bit of confusion.
I would think that if we're saying that it can't change more often than once a day, then it really doesn't matter that they change all at the same time, because I think practically speaking, they might have to sort of be changed in sequence or something like that. But, a once-a-day change shouldn't be.
I guess it would depend if they're going to have the same information on each sign, as opposed to if it's different. That's going to then get confusing. I don't know. All of this is a discussion, and that's what we're doing. Oops, I'm sorry.
I was just saying that I would not require that those West Pearl Street signs all say the same thing.
Mr. Boucher.
So just to refresh what Mr. Curry was going over, stipulation, the second variance would, could you just refresh my memory what you just said about the
Yeah,
variance?
so for number 2, variance number 2, to allow symbols, graphics, and images for each EMC sign where 3 lines of text only are allowed, I think what I'm hearing the will of the board is that we would be approving that for the 5 West Pearl Street signs with changeover once a day, maximum, and we would not be allowing that for the Main Street sign.
Go ahead.
The only thing I'd like to come back to is what I suggested, that we could consider allowing one essentially truly static graphical image on the Main Street sign. That it's essentially a permanent image, like you would have with a permanent sign, it's just displayed electronically. So that was the only thing I wanted to put out there in my earlier comments for us to consider. We don't even have to go that far. It's just taking it a slight step beyond, like, in fact, I mean, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because I'm not even sure how clear the ordinance truly is about, what the background of the electronic sign has to be other than the text. Like, it could be a different color, it could be, so I realize it might be one of those things that's not super clear what it is, but by even saying it could be some image, even if it never changes, it is taking a step further into the idea of allowing, I think image is part of what that categories are listed. So I just wanted to put that out there if that made a difference for folks. If not, I think we could just, let things ride, and then if the ordinance changes, then there would be the ability to adopt to that.
Mr. Falk?
Well, in the ordinance, 19097B2 states, and I'll read, "The changing sign electronics shall be restricted to 3 lines of text only, and no additional symbols, graphics, or images shall be allowed." So I think just by stating that, it means 3 lines of text only, and not even like one symbol.
What was your vision of this graphic that might be allowed? What would you think would, like an image, like a logo?
I was thinking like of a logo for the
the
if
art
there is a
center.
logo for the art center.
Okay. I just want to throw out, I mean, every artist seemed to have a logo, right? I mean, if it's a Grateful Dead, you'd have dancing bears there that would be a logo, right? I mean, so I'm just wondering,
Oh, no, I meant like just, it would be one logo forever, essentially, one image forever.
Oh, you're stating for the
large sign.
the building, the business, as opposed to who's coming in.
Right.
To be at
The
that
text would
venue.
change, but the image behind it might just be, a logo for the art center. And that-
That's a great idea. I just worry that it kind of is on the slippery slope of because the ordinance says no graphics or logos. So, but-
And there is already a large sign that's going to say Nashua Performing Arts Center.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's really necessary, and it's, like I said, we just wanted to put it out there for consideration. And in one sense, we get into some restrictions and all, and like I was noting, we might need to have a nod towards future ordinances, and maybe it would just automatically, go away. But if we stipulated it could only be this one static image, and then the ordinance opens up to allow for graphics, then I think you have to come back to get that taken care of.
Mr. Fogg, would they, if the ordinance changed to allow graphics, would they have to come back for anything anyway? Because they wouldn't need a variance for it if the ordinance changed.
But if we had a
right? They could just
stipulation.
start doing it.
Probably not.
Probably not. That
Probably
they
not. I mean,
wouldn't-
I can't really answer it because I don't know what the code is going to be changing with respect to EMCs. Someone mentioned the new code. Right now, we're working on an RFP to hire a consultant to help us write the new land use code. So with that process and with the process of actually doing it, it's probably going to be even if it's approved now, a year and a half down the road, 2 years down the road. But, you know, we don't know what direction we're going to go with the sign ordinance or the EMC part of it.
I was just thinking that, you know, hypothetically, if the ordinance did change to allow graphics, then they wouldn't have to come here for anything. They could just do.
Probably not.
Yeah,
Probably
that would
not.
that would have been my guess.
I mean, if the code does allow something in the future and they already have it, then it's permitted. So, but I don't know if there's going to be any size restrictions or font or
Yeah.
color restrictions.
We have no
There's a
idea.
lot of other issues that we're not aware of yet.
Yeah. So, all right. I think what I'm hearing, and maybe Mr. Courier, maybe this is what you're hearing, is what you actually said initially was that variance 2, which is the symbols, graphics, and images, the sense of the board is to vote no on that. And on the other,
On the Main Street.
on the Main Street one, and then, but to allow it on the West Pearl Street.
On the 5 West
With
Pearl.
with the limitation that it not change more often
Than
than
once.
once every 24 hours. Okay. And then the other variances, we seem to be okay
But
with.
variance 2 is not really separated,
Well,
right?
We can,
Well, we
we
can-
can make
we
it,
can put a
the motion
stipulation.
can reflect that, though.
Yeah, you can make the way you make the motions, the
Just
way whoever
podcast.
makes the motion.
The large variance that came before the board a couple of years ago, I think most all you remember for Costco, I think there were about 10 or 11 variances.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe those were all taken individually. This one has 6. So something for consideration, maybe just to have a vote on each one, because they're all kind of intertwined. It's either the Main Street box office sign or
I think the concern was more, I think, about the fact that item 2 applies to all 6 signs, and we're saying we want to not allow it for one of the 6 signs. So, and that's, I think, the other members of the board were saying, well, we can just do that with the way we handle the motions regarding that item itself. Right.
I guess that's fine, as long as it's clear for each different motion or each different variance, what's being supported or not supported.
Do we need to discuss this with the applicant?
Well, it's our choice if we.
Yeah, it's, okay.
Not
Because I know
really-
sometimes we ask the applicant if they would be willing to do X, Y, or Z.
The applicant pretty much said they would be willing to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, for the most part,
They
yes.
categorically stated that, so I think that if everyone is comfortable with the discussion, then maybe we look to making a motion, but being really clear so that we don't have to do 6 motions unless it's more advisable to do 6
I think
within
we
the
should-
letter of the law.
I mean,
How do you, you know what, that is a good thing. Mr. Courier, Mr. Clerk.
I would suggest we have 6 requests here. I'd like to do each
Okay.
request. That's the way, I mean, Kate kind of sets the outline of the minutes, thank you, Kate, and it's exactly what I was expecting, which was 6 different motions.
Then that's what we shall do. Our clerk has spoken. Would somebody care to make a motion on variance number or request number 1?
No, I suppose I can do this unless, Mr. Shaw, you
No,
like to
no.
do motions? Oh, we should make Mr. Nicoy do motions.
No, it's only the
Only nobody-
5.
No, next time you get to do motions, okay. So for all of these motions, the owner is NPAC Corporation, City of Nashua. The applicant is Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director, City of Nashua. The address is 201 Main Street, 7884 West Pearl Street, Sheet 81, Lot 3. And so I'm not going to repeat that for each of these motions. I hope that's acceptable. Okay. First motion, requesting the variance from Land Use Code Section 190-97 to allow 6 wall-mounted electronic message center signs, 1 facing Main Street, 5 facing West Pearl Street, where they are not permitted in the D1 MU zone. The board finds that this variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. The Performing Arts Center is a special building in Nashua. The sign in front over the box office is needed to promote the artists who will appear there, and the signs on West Pearl Street will be promoting artists or other things that will happen typically in the future, but we're not restricting that they be future items. And the board has had some discussion and testimony by the applicant that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. The board discussed the West Pearl Street signs and where they're positioned, and if they were positioned any farther back so that a variance was not required, then they would interfere with accessibility. The board is not sure about being within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, but we're willing to bend it a little bit in this regard, given the other discussions. The board believes this will not, we have no testimony that it will adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. We believe it is not contrary to public interest and substantial justice will be served. So I will make a motion to approve variance 1. Second by Mr. Courier.
Before we have a vote, I want to just be clear. Section 1, or variance 1, says to allow 6 wall-mounted electronic message center signs, 1 facing Main Street, 5 facing West Pearl Street, where they are not permitted. So we are categorically stating that it is just the 5 facing West Pearl Street, and we are not stating the 1?
No, all 6.
No, we're allowed
We're
6.
doing all 6.
But I just realized something. It says wall-mounted, and the West Pearl Street signs are not going to be wall-mounted. Does that matter? Do we care about that?
Well, we have to classify them as something. They're closest to being a wall sign because they're intended to be looked at through a wall, through a window. I mean, they're not ground signs, they're not projecting signs, they're not directional signs, they don't meet any of the other categories of types of
signs.
sign.
So this is wording in a term in the ordinance that is the closest fit.
We've never really had a sign that's
hanging
down from a
Yep.
ceiling anyway. So
Okay.
we just classified them as wall signs because
Yeah.
they're
So-
close to the wall.
But this first ordinance, we are simply passing it to allow 6 EMCs. And that's what this first variance is.
Mr. Shaw?
So I think this is though where we want to have, and I'm sorry, now I can't remember if you actually said this, as part of the motion, the once-a-day change on the 5 signs that are on West Pearl Street. And I also think we need to speak to whatever the changing frequency is, that if we indeed want to do something more restrictive than the allowed 5 seconds for the 3 lines of text, so.
I think that would be all on request number 2, which is the
I would
graphics and
think
images.
so.
I'd say no. Bear with me. This Main Street sign, we're not, at least it seems, we're not going to allow any graphics or images. And so that wouldn't be the place where we're putting, in fact, the only restriction we would do in that variance would be that it's not allowed for the Main Street sign. I think the EMC signs, just without regard to whether there's images or graphics, need to be dealt with as what is their frequency of changeover if we want anything more restrictive than the 5 seconds. And what I've heard is, and maybe the board won't allow for the West Pearl Street signs to be anything other than just the text. I don't think that's the case from everything we talked about. But it could be that we still would just, this would be where we should say, those can't change more than once a day, which seems to be what the board wants. And then I think we need to speak to what the frequency is. The applicant stated 8 seconds would be their plan for Main Street. I know we've talked about other frequencies. I don't know if there is a common will of the board. I think something that is closer to on the order of minutes, and that could be that it's, even if it's at least a half a minute, like the applicant said, that I think the whole point seemed to be that they're okay changing that. It just, I think we need to look at what we think is reasonable. I mean, I sat at the light at East Pearl Street onto Main Street for like the full cycle this morning, and, you know, if there had been a change every 8 seconds, I would have seen a bunch of things, because it was probably at least a minute or a minute and a half or whatever that cycle is. It certainly seemed pretty long with the walk signal. But I think a half a minute or a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, they all seem reasonable to me. I don't know what the right thing is. I don't want to be so restrictive, but I also think we want to be at least somewhat of a nod towards what we think, you know, we want to limit drivers, especially active drivers really, is who I'd be concerned about more than anybody, from seeing a bunch of changes. So I think 8 seconds is too quick. I just don't know where it becomes more reasonable, so.
Mr. Courier?
Well, the applicant had mentioned 30 seconds, and
Yeah.
I would, just to keep the ball rolling here, throw out a 30-second changeover with a slow fade out and fade in. I wanted to say, you know, Mr. Falk spoke to about there has to be black for a second, but with these modern signs, you could say, how long do I want it black? 3 milliseconds. Maybe I'll make it 3 microseconds. You know, it's going to be a flash. I'd rather control it with a slow fade out and fade in every no more than every 30 seconds, and I'd throw that out as a stipulation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes logical common sense.
Okay. So, and Mr. Shaw, you think that would
Apply to
that would apply to number 1?
Yes.
Okay, I can.
With a distinction, we're going to have
Yeah.
a different time rate for the Main Street sign and for the 5 West Pearl
Okay.
sign.
So I'm going to amend the motion to add stipulation A, that the Main Street sign change at a frequency no shorter than 30 seconds, and that the West Pearl Street signs change not more often than once every 24 hours. Does that meet with everybody's approval?
That captures
I
it.
think that's what we all agreed
Mr.
to.
Courier, do you want to
Mr. Courier, since you
second?
seconded it, is that acceptable?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll second that motion.
Okay. So, as amended. Further discussion?
Okay. Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor, so that is a unanimous decision on that, on variance number 1.
Variance 1, okay. Variance number 2, to allow symbols, graphics, and images for each EMC sign where there are three lines of text are only are allowed. The board wants to keep that requirement for the Main Street sign, but will grant this variance only for the West Pearl Street signs, and not for the Main Street sign. The board believes this variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, to promote the current and upcoming uses of the Arts Center, given the special conditions of the property, its location, the signs on West Pearl Street are behind glass, and they will have the appearance of fixed posters. And we believe that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. Again, this is certainly not within the wording of the ordinance, but we are here to bend the ordinance when we believe it's necessary. So I'm going to say it's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance that the ZBA is allowed to bend it. We believe that it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels, that it is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. So do I have a second on that one? Mr. Shaw? Thank you
Discussion.
for your second. Discussion.
Just for my clarity, usually, I understand what you're trying to do. Shouldn't that have been a stipulation on this motion? The motion read whether you approve or reject this variance, and then if it was approved and you want to put stipulations, I think Mr. Lionel did what we want to do, is he put some stipulation, he made the motion part of stipulation, but I believe we should be, the motion should have been to approve the area variance with stipulations, Main Street, and is.
Oh, I see, so you want to run it concurrently?
Yeah, no, I
No.
get his point, and I think he's right.
Yeah, I wanted to speak the same thing. I think we need to speak to why we're rejecting the Main Street request. I think we're justifying, it's almost like, it really feels like we should have two motions. We should have a denial for one part of this, and we have an approval for one part of it. So that's what I think might be the cleanest thing, that we actually have essentially 7 motions tonight.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I'm going to withdraw that.
Pete
motion.
did not think of that.
Yes. More work for Mr. Courier. Okay. I will withdraw that motion.
Well, no, I think your motion, if it's just applied to the 5 West Pearl Street.
Well, I would have to amend the motion to say that it
Yeah.
applies only to the 5 West Pearl Street signs.
I think that's reasonable,
Okay.
so that you
Fine.
don't have to restate
Yeah.
all that.
Okay, and Mr. Shaw, that's acceptable to you?
Yeah.
As a seconder, okay. So this version of motion 2, to approve allowing symbols, graphics, and images for the EMC signs on West Pearl Street only. And I did actually, in my description, talk about why the board believes that's okay.
And if I could just chime in on
Yes.
your motion, sorry, I think it would be worth to just restate the stipulation that they're not to change in frequency greater than 1 a day.
Well, we said that in motion number 1. I don't think we
Okay.
need to say it again.
All right,
Because that is a stipulation on motion number 1,
all right.
on variance 1. Yeah, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, then I'm going to. Mr. Courier, how do you vote on variance number 2?
For the variance to approve the 5 Pearl Street signs, I vote to approve.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Shaw?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor, so that is a unanimous decision on variance number 2. Are we going to go through to the end and then have the motion to deny?
No, we're going to do that right now.
Okay, because that, you said what was going on in my head.
Okay. So, I'd like to make a motion to deny variance to allow symbols, graphics, and images for the EMC sign on Main Street, above the box office on Main Street. The ordinance allows only 3 lines of text. The board believes this variance is not needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, and that there are no special conditions of the property that would require this variance to be approved. The board believes that it is not within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We don't have any testimony on the property values of surrounding parcels. The board believes it might be in public interest, but we don't have any evidence of that one way or the other. Substantial justice would be served. However, because 2 of the points of law are not met, I make a motion to deny this area variance for the Main Street EMC.
And thank you, Mr. Shaw, for your second. Mr. Courier, how do you vote on the motion to deny?
I vote to approve the motion to deny
Thank you.
the Main Street sign.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote on
Mr.
the
Bou-
motion to
Mr.
deny?
Boucher votes not in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor of the motion to deny.
Mr. Shaw, how do you vote on the motion to deny?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor of the motion to deny.
So 4-1.
Well, there's 4-1, and now, Mr. Lionel, I assume you'll carry through?
Yes, I will keep going as long as my voice holds out. Make a motion to approve variance to exceed 50% of the area of the sign to be the EMC portion, 100% proposed for all EMC signs. The board finds that this variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. There's limited space where the signs can be made, and the EMC signs are how it's going to be constructed. There's no other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. The board believes this is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, that it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels, that it is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. Mr. Shaw.
And Mr. Shaw, thank you for your second. Mr. Courier, how do you vote on the motion?
I vote in favor of the motion to approve.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. So that is another unanimous
Okay,
decision.
so let's see. Next, variance number 4, from Land Use Code Section 190-108 D2, to exceed maximum wall sign height of 20 feet, 24 feet 5 inches proposed for EMC sign facing Main Street. The board does believe this variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, because that's about the only place that a sign can be. The benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. The board believes this is within spirit and intent of the ordinance, that it will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels, it is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice would be served.
And thank you, Mr. Shaw, for your second. Mr. Courier, how do you vote on the motion to approve?
I vote in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote on the motion?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote on the motion?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Shaw, how do you vote on the motion?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor of the motion. So that is a unanimous approval, and we're on to
Number
number 5.
Okay. Make a motion to approve variance from Land Use Code Section 190-108 C6 to exceed maximum wall sign area, 100 square feet permitted, 112 square feet proposed on Main Street. And this is for the fixed sign identifying, I think it's, I assume it's, well, anyway, I'm not going to elaborate on that. Variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, position of the building, and the size of the building facing the street. The benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. The board believes this is within spirit and intent of the ordinance, that it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels, that it is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served.
Mr. Courier, how do you, oops, I'm
Mr. Shaw-
sorry.
Mr. Shaw
Mr. Shaw,
seconded.
thank you for your second.
Discussion.
Mr. Boucher.
I think staff has a question on
Oh,
the motion.
Mr. Falk.
The 112 square feet, that's both signs on Main Street. That's the EMC and the static sign.
Okay, thank you.
Combined.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
That does not change the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Courier, how do you vote on the motion to approve?
I vote in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. That's another unanimous decision. And now I think we have our last one.
Number 6, make a motion to approve a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-108E1 to exceed maximum number of wall signs per business, 3 permitted, a total of 7 wall signs proposed, 2 on Main Street, 5 on West Pearl Street. And this is all of these requests are for the Nashua Center for the Arts, or the Nashua Performing Arts Center, whatever it's being called. The board believes this variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions to the property, its location on the corner, and the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. The board believes this is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, that it will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels, that it is not contrary to public interest, and that substantial justice will be served.
And thank you, Mr. Shaw, for your second.
Just discussion?
Oh, certainly.
So I just want to note, I feel like, you know, the ask sounds like a large number, obviously, but I think because the scale of those signs is so relatively small on West Pearl Street, that in some ways, I think if there had been one larger sign on West Pearl Street and to have met the 3 allowed, it actually might have been more onerous than having these 5 smaller signs. So I just wanted to have that in the record on our discussion.
I also think that the signs being behind the window diminishes their impact.
Yeah, it almost seems like they're going to feel more like window displays than signs in what the average layperson would think of. Like, I don't think I'd look at them and think, if anything, we talked about, like, you know, the poster kind of thing or whatever. To me, it seems more like a window display, not what feels like a classic
And
wall
they're
sign.
actually asking for the variance.
Right, yeah. So I understand why, it's just,
Yeah.
I think perception-wise, I think just on the surface, it sounds like a much bigger ask than what I think it really, in effect, really feels like.
I agree. Makes sense. Mr. Courier, how do you vote on the motion to approve?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. That's another unanimous decision on that motion. Then we had here Mr. Lannon, Mr. Lally, and Mr. Collier. Most of your motions have been granted, so congratulations on that. The one denial did have to do with the electronic messaging signs, and we are observing the letter of the law on that one. Should you have any comments, questions, concerns, please re-refer back to either Mr. Carter Falk or Ms. Poirier in the planning department. Also note that any decision made by this board can be appealed by anyone within 30 days. And other than that, congratulations on making the bulk of your ask. And thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. It absolutely was. Thank you. And right now, because we have Mr. Mancara who needs to come back up, I'm going to give this board about a 5-minute break so that we can transition.
We're good.
Mr. Shaw has recused himself from the case on
Case number 2.
Southern New Hampshire.
Yep.
And Mr. Minkara will be voting in his stead. We will appoint Mr. Minkara to that. So I will read this case into the record. The other adjustment, while I'm making adjustments, case number 4, I think it was, number 3, excuse me, 18 Paul Avenue is being rescheduled or continued to November 9th. Gentleman has an essential position at the hospital and needed to get to work. Okay. Southern New Hampshire Regional Medical Center owner, Jen Robichaux, Barlow Signs applicant, 10-12 Prospect Street, sheet 30, lot 65, requesting the following variances from Land Use Code Section 190-108C8. 1, to exceed maximum number of wall signs, 1 permitted, 1 existing, 1 additional wall sign proposed, and 2, to exceed maximum area of wall signs, 6 square feet permitted, 60.42 square feet existing from variance granted on 4/9/13. An additional 18.79 square feet proposed for a total area of 79.21 square feet. This is the RC zone in Ward 4. And I see a gentleman up at the podium. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Hi, good evening. My name is Brandon Courier. I'm from Barlow Signs, 23 McKelwin Street in Merrimack, New Hampshire. I am here with Scott Cody, representing Southern New Hampshire Regional Medical Center. So we're here this evening seeking ZBA approval for an additional internally illuminated sign, wall sign, which increases the total square footage to 18.79 above what is currently there. The proposed sign in front of you this evening is located at the entrance side of the building, seen from the Prospect Street and Dearborn Street. The sign will aid the wayfinding public in safety, locating their end destination. Do you all have the drawings in front of you while I progress? Okay.
Yes.
As this is a medical facility, branding and wayfinding is very important to the successful navigation of patients and guests. With the magnitude of this building, we designed the sign to be respectful to the bylaws, but also sizable enough to be seen while approaching the building. That does not have any identification for the cancer center currently. In addition, the sign is locked in by hospital property, will not be a burden on any neighbors, and it fits cohesively within the with the surrounding signage. The internal illumination will not glow or shine into any residential in its current location. Approval of this wall sign will not be contrary to the public interest, as it will be aiding public to safely wayfind this destination. The sign respects and sticks within the spirit of the ordinance, as we're not looking for anything out of character with a building of this size, especially on this campus with multiple buildings. In closing, granting variance would not harm the surrounding property values, nor would it be a distraction to motorists. Its design is to keep consistent with the wayfinding package that the hospital currently has in place. And Mr. Cody also would like to add into this. Please let me know if we have any questions that do come up. I'd be happy to answer them.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Scott Cody. I am the Vice President for Facilities and Emergency Management for Southern New Hampshire Health. Wanted to just tell you what is kind of driving the request for this sign as
Mr. Cody,
well.
could you please state your address also for the record?
8 Prospect Street,
Thank you,
Nashua,
sir.
New Hampshire. You're very welcome. The driver for the request for the sign is that the organization was very fortunate to receive a significant contribution towards improving the cancer center from the Selinsky family. And the opportunity to be able to not only recognize that, but also to provide the wayfinding, as was indicated. This sign is the only other sign in addition to our ambulatory surgery center sign, which is on the same side of the building. That's the only wall signs that we actually have at this location, and it's for identifying programs. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none? Yes, sir. Oh, you can, there's no questions. I'm now going to ask if there's anybody here present who would like to speak in favor of this application. Unless you have something further to say, sir.
Nope, I'm just picking up the
Okay.
voice.
Seeing none, is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak with questions, comments, concerns, or opposition to this application? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak with any questions, comments, concerns, or opposition to this application? Seeing none, Kate, none. I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Boucher.
I'm in favor of the application. I am very familiar with this building and the campus as a whole. There's been several requests made by Southern New Hampshire, and I think it fits into the campus that they have there. I don't think it's overburdening the building and the square footage. I know we had approved something back in 2013, and the square footage is just slightly over that. No issues since then with the signage. And again, I think, again, scale of building, location of the buildings, where they are in the downtown area and the campus style, I think it fits right in and certainly will direct people to where they need to go. So I'm in favor of the application as it stands.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel.
I'm in favor of the application for the reasons that Mr. Boucher stated.
Mr. Minkara.
I'm also in favor of the application for the reasons stated, and would just add that particularly with the medical facility, I think the importance of facilitating wayfinding is in the public interest.
Thank you. Is Ms. Boris still on Zoom?
She's back on.
She's back.
Yes, I am.
Ms. Boris?
I'm in favor of the application for all the reasons stated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Nally?
I'm in favor of the application. As Brandon stated, it is a safety issue. Haven't been down in that area. There's quite a bit of traffic, and if there's signage for Solinsky Center now, I didn't see it. So I think this is a really big deal to lessen the traffic confusion down there. And then as that being said, I'm very much in favor of this.
Thank you. Mr. Courier?
I'm in favor of the application for the reasons already stated, and I'd just also like to throw in kind of a reminder that this is an RC zone. It's really not an RC zone. I mean, the hospital's been growing. I think we all feel that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
The RC zone's been there since before the hospital was growing. If there was, revisions to the zoning law more frequently, we'd probably have like a hospital zoning. Quite frankly, the signage would probably be under what might be seen in other hospitals. But in this case, again, the 60 square feet seems onerous, but for the scale of the building, I don't think it is at all. I'm in favor.
Thank you. And I agree with all the comments being made. The signage is very definitely needed. Would somebody care to make a motion? Thank you, Mr. Boucher.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the area variance for Southern New Hampshire Regional Medical Center, owner Gene Robichaud, Paolo Signs, applicant 10 and 12 Prospect Street, sheet 30, lot 65, requesting the following variances from Land Use Code, section 190-108, section C, subsection 8. 1, to exceed maximum number of wall signs, 1 permitted, 1 existing, 1 additional wall sign proposed, and 2, to exceed maximum area of wall signs, 6 square feet permitted, 60.42 square feet existing from variance granted on 4/9 of 2013, and an additional 18.79 square feet proposed for a total area of 79.21 square feet. It's in the RC Zone, Ward 4. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. Again, this is one of the buildings that the hospital owns in that general area of the main hospital. It's a campus-style type of setup. Again, the zone is RC zone, but again, the signage is there for directional purposes and identify the building and fits right into what is there now. We find that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than variance. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find that it would not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We find that it's not contrary to public interest. We find that substantial justice would be served. So again, I make a motion to approve the area variance.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Courier. Mr. Boucher, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Minkara, how do you vote?
Mr. Minkara votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. That's a unanimous decision. Congratulations, your variance has been granted. As we've stated earlier this evening, anyone can appeal any decision made by this board. They have 30 days with which to do so. And should you have any questions, comments, concerns, please refer back to Mr. Carter Falk in the Planning Department or Ms. Kate Poirier. Again, congratulations, thank you, and have a good evening. And we'll wait 2 seconds to give Mr. Shaw a chance to get back up. Didn't mean to pick up my sign.
Oh, I'm sure you know who you are.
Well, I get confused. Case number 3. Thomas G. and Christina Jarrett, owners, 68 Pioneer Drive, Sheet C, Lot 1617, requesting variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17E1 to exceed maximum driveway width 24 feet permitted, 22 feet existing, up to an additional 26 feet proposed by having driveway flare out at 4.75 feet past the front property line to accommodate proposed new garage bays for a total width of 48 feet. This is in the R30 zone and it's Ward 5. And if you would please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, my name's Thomas Jarrett. This is my wife Christina. We live at 68 Pioneer Drive.
And the floor is yours, sir.
As stated, we are proposing to expand the width of our driveway before we reach the the back of the front setback. Currently, our driveway is access for the old existing two-car garage. We last August, September, received approval for our garage and bedroom addition. On the plot plan, we had our proposed driveway, but due to the fact that I was informed that it was not properly dimensioned, it was never reviewed at the time. So until recently, we believed that all of our plans were approved. In speaking with a couple contractors for the paving, they brought to my attention that the ordinance was a little bit more strict in Nashua than maybe other surrounding areas. So in looking into the ordinance and researching, I came to find out that the proposed driveway was outside of the ordinance. So we are here to apply for the variance to flare the driveway, starting 4.75 feet past the property line, which the property line is 10 3/4 feet from the road. So the the flare of the driveway will be far behind the the front of the property line. With that being the case, if there were to ever be a sidewalk added, the right-of-way is still going to be the same 22 feet that's currently there. The driveway that we are proposing does not encroach on any of the other setbacks. There's still plenty of room. There's actually 28 feet to the side property line at that side. We're required to have 20 feet. The driveway as proposed would still retain 86% open space on the 0.96 acre lot. This is far above the 60% required. The proposed variance would allow us to make proper use of the new garages and not have to drive over the grass to enter. We happen to drive large SUV vehicles, and having a very tight driveway would make it prohibitive. This is as well a part of the overall addition project, which in turn is increasing the property value. This does happen to be fairly similar to many driveways in our neighborhood and the surrounding area. And unfortunately, where we found out late in the process that the proposed driveway did not follow the ordinance, we already have the additions built. So unfortunately, we cannot go back to the drawing board and try and make everything fall within the ordinances. So that's why we're here to ask for the variance.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Lionel?
Could you just elaborate on the improperly dimensioned aspect of your original?
So the, let's see, do you have the application in front of you?
I have the application, yes.
So supplement number 3 of 10 is the original certified plot plan that was submitted with the applications for the building permit. So as you can see, the building additions were all dimensioned to the property lines and setbacks, but there weren't there weren't necessarily dimensions on the driveway, the proposed driveway itself. So at that point, I was informed that the planning department most likely overlooked that at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Courier?
Just curious, in the application, it talks about folks saying the Nashua width is more restrictive than other communities. I'm just curious, do you have any examples of other communities and what those widths are?
Back in 2012, I helped my parents with a garage addition project at their house. So the state regulation is 50-foot width. In Hudson, it retains that 50-foot width. And when you get behind your setback, you can basically expand as necessary for use of the property. So that, unfortunately, I was thinking of the state regulation and not necessarily the city regulation.
All right, thanks. I guess the other question I had is like on your sheet 3 of 10, which
Yes.
is the original plot plan, versus sheet 4 of 10, which is what your proposal is here. It just, to me, it looks like sheet 4 is is a bit more asphalt. I mean, to me, the sheet 3, kind of with the rounded edges, looked maybe a little more natural.
Sheet 5 that's proposed.
Sheet 5, I'm sorry, and then sheet 3 of 10.
Yeah,
Sheet
page
4
3
is
and
not
4 are
listed,
kind of
yeah.
flipped in here, but.
All right, so sheet 5 of 10, or comparing between 3 of 10 and 5 of 10, I would just, maybe more of just a thought, or why you went from kind of a curved asphalt proposal versus like a triangle.
Just with the additional thought put into it, while speaking with the contractors and actually being able to see the property and being able to better envision the use of the new garages and everything. And like I said, with our larger vehicles, being able to make the turn to properly enter the new garages without having to drive over the grass. I just thought it prudent to basically make it as useful as possible.
All right, thanks.
And with the original plot plan not being dimensioned, it was really just not able to see all of that in front of us.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone on Zoom who would care to speak in favor of this application? No? Is there anyone here who would like to speak with questions, comments, concerns, or opposition to this application? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak with questions, comments, concerns, or opposition to this application? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Lionel.
I'm in favor of the application. I mean, I definitely appreciate the applicants coming before us and asking for the variance, unlike probably the majority of homeowners who would just go ahead and enlarge their driveway within the right-of-way without asking. I have one near my house that did that. What they're asking is not unreasonable and is not out of character for what I've seen elsewhere. Although, to be honest, I would have preferred the more of the swoop than just the straight triangle, but that's an aesthetic thing. So I would vote in favor of this.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, I'm in favor. I do especially appreciated the applicant's letter that was also part of their application. And I think it really spoke to, this seemed like one of those cases where somebody truly thought they were doing all the right stuff along the way. Something kind of went a little bit wrong. There was at least maybe an assumption there, and I understand how that could have been made, but this seems like one of those they've gotten so far along, and it certainly seems to me like if they had known up front, they probably would have set this garage addition further back or something and been able to accommodate. So I think they would have in good faith avoided this issue, and now it's kind of like, oh my gosh, we have this big investment, and now we can't even get our vehicles in without driving over the grass. So I think it's quite reasonable, and I think it's just it's an unfortunate situation that occurred, but I think very, very innocently, truly, in this case. So.
Thank you. Mr. Minkara.
I agree with the comments made, and I would just add that, were this widening, at the curb, I would feel a little bit differently. But in this case, the taper begins close to 15 feet back from the edge of pavement, so it's less impactful in that way.
Thank you. Ms. Boras.
I'm actually in favor of the application.
Thank
for
you.
everything that's already been stated by my colleagues.
Thank you. Mr. Nahili.
I'm in favor of this application. I also would like to thank the applicants. This is a well-put-together packet, so thank you for taking the time to do that. as stated by everybody else. They're holding the 22 feet at the curbside, and it's got the nice taper about 15 feet back. I really think this is in good taste, and I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Mr. Courier?
I had pause when I first saw this application, and I did my site walk before the packages arrived. And, I have to say that, this is larger lots of land here than downtown. I had never been on this end of Pioneer Drive. And I think the lot sizes here generally kind of mitigate a driveway issue, or if there's an overage of the 24 feet. And that is just one point I wanted to throw out. Again, like say in general, a request for a driveway overage of 24 feet on a 0.9 acre property, to me, might be not as big request as on a quarter acre property, where all the others are quarter acre, because that quarter acre, it ends up looking more like a just one parking lot and not any lawn. So I just wanted to throw that out. Also, I'm in favor, and I appreciate the taper. I also, like Mr. Minkara, I would feel differently if it just went right to the street.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I'm also in favor of the application, and like Mr. Curry stated, one of the things I notice about Pioneer Drive at this end is, it's a scale of property, it's a little bit larger than normal. So I think that I was surprised that the house, the addition looks good. Both additions look good on the house. I think it fits in, and I think the driveway would fit in. And I also appreciate the fact that some of us who've driven large SUVs or pickup trucks know that 20 feet, 21, 22 feet long, it's tough to straighten out into a garage. So I can appreciate that, but again, I think this fits into this piece of property.
Thank you. I too am in support of this application. It was really well presented, well done, well documented, so thank you for that. And also, as somebody who gets to drive their SUV into what I consider a small garage, I have to stop and aim, so I get this. Would somebody care to make a motion? Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
I'd like to make a motion on behalf of Thomas G. and Christina Jarrett, the owners at 68 Pioneer Drive, Sheet C, Lot 1617. The request is for a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17E1 to exceed maximum driveway width where 24 feet is permitted, 22 feet is existing, and up to an additional 26 feet is proposed by having driveway flare out at the 4.75 feet past the front property line to accommodate proposed new garage bays for a total width of 48 feet. This is in the R30 zone. The variance is needed for the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. It's our understanding and that the process of going through this addition was one where it was not recognized that this placement of the driveway was going to cause an issue, and it was discovered after the fact, and the applicants are trying to rectify this in the most reasonable manner and limiting the impact by doing the flare out, by keeping the driveway so it is still set back from the street edge by approximately 15 feet. And this also, the scale of the lot is such that it will not be significantly imposing as far as the percentage of the front yard that's occupied by pavement and driveway. It's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. There's no indication of any negative effects on surrounding parcel property values. It's not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. And with that, I move to approve this area variance.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher, for your second. Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. That's 5-0, that's unanimous. Congratulations, your variance has been granted. As we've stated all evening, anyone has up to 30 days with which to appeal any decision this board makes. Should you have any comments, questions, concerns, please refer back to Mr. Carter Falk or Ms. Kate Boyer in the Planning Department. And again, congratulations. Thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you very much.
You also. We're skipping over this. Okay, our next case, G. Hurd and Son Construction, LLC owner, George Hurd, manager, Tumpney Hurd Clegg, LLC applicant, 976 West Hollis Street, Sheet D, Lot 509, requesting the following. Variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17B to allow 4 principal structures on one lot, 1 permitted to construct 4 single-family detached dwelling units, and 2 variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17E1 to exceed maximum driveway width, 24 feet permitted, 1 10-foot wide existing driveway used by adjacent property, an additional 24 feet requested for a total width of 34 feet. This is in the R9 zone in Ward 5. And please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Certainly. My name is Colin Jean. I'm an attorney here in Nashua with offices at 64 McKean Street. I'm here this evening on behalf of G. Hurd and Son Construction and Tumpney Hurd Clegg applicant. I'm here this evening with Michael Granger from MJ Granger Engineering and Surveying. I'm also here this evening with Mr. George Hurd, the owner, and here on behalf of the applicant. Thank you very much for hearing this application today. As was just stated, the applicant is seeking 2 variances. 1, to construct 4 single-family dwellings on the 3.15 acre parcel that exists at 976 West Hollis Street. That parcel, as you know, is in an R9 zone, which on the one hand precludes more than 1 structure per lot, while at the same time allowing condominiums. So there seemed to be a bit of a paradox there in terms of what is and what isn't. The parcel of land has already been inspected by the Conservation Commission and been given its blessing for its intended use. As you see on page 2 of the application, after we took a look at the zoning tables, which restricts on one hand how many units you can have on a single parcel, and on the other hand seems to indicate that you could have more than one if it's in condominium formation. There's a list of like developments that have been approved in the past in the R9 zone: Caleb Street, Lowther Place, Brayburn Drive, Copperfield, Mahogany Drive, Courtney Lane, and Trestle Brook. This particular property is bounded by single-family homes on 2 sides, manufactured housing on the back end, and by an island that separates this particular offshoot of West Hollis Street, which I'm sure you're probably all familiar with, from the main thoroughfare, which is Route 111, West Hollis Street. So this particular little bend in the road is off of the main road, away from oncoming heavy traffic that particular route experiences. So with respect to the request for a variance on the number of dwellings or single-family residences on the property, it was the intention of the developer not to crowd in so many homes as to change the character of the neighborhood, to give each property the significant amount of land mass that would be accompanied by a normal single-family residence in an R9 zone. The properties will be serviced by public water, private sewer, and regular, usual utilities. But it will be in condominium form, just so that's very clear, because I'm not sure if I've done that. Again, I think one of the reasons why the applicant is here this evening is because this type of request is not uncommon in this particular Ward 5, R9 area. With respect to the variance for the driveway, there is an existing driveway in the property. It's 10 feet wide. It was allowed by the owner of this particular unit many years ago for the purpose of providing access to what was otherwise, if not landlocked, a piece of property that was not accessible by its own driveway from that particular bend area. That, unbeknownst to anyone at that time, I do believe, the subdivision plan was allowed to include an exclusive easement for the property adjacent to this 976 West Hollis Street. Upon closer review, it became evident that there were two ways to go with this. Get permission from the existing easement owner to share or allow expansion of that driveway to service this particular parcel. And after significant discussions, the owner of the property, well within his right, and because he wanted to have the security and privity of using his driveway exclusively, as was included in the easement, we were left with the option of asking for this variance so that the landowner would have access to his property. So that's really the, and I think I've included a copy of that particular declaration of easement as Exhibit A to our application. Yes. So with respect to the needed requirements of getting a variance, I hope the board will find that this does not in any way out of character with the neighborhood in general or the general vicinity. It doesn't, if anything, it does not diminish property values. In fact, bordered by 200 some odd manufactured housings in back, and nice but very middle-class properties to the east and west, and of course that empty island of space in front of it. New housing would do nothing but increase the value of the surrounding neighborhood. Basically, at this point in time, the proposed use is in line with what's acceptable or has been accepted in the past and is seen as not being contrary to the ordinance in question. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have, and the engineer, Michael Granger, is here if there's any specifics. Obviously, the applicant and owner knows that planning board would have many more issues with the actual plans.
Are there any? Mr. Lionel.
I noticed that the Conservation Commission met about this in 2018.
Yes.
And I have this faint memory that we had a case on this, in this area, on this particular location, but I don't see it. Usually,
yes,
we get minutes included, but I don't remember what happened.
Okay, so I believe in 2020, the neighbor at 972 West Hollis Street came before the board. I believe it was Mrs. McClellan, came before the board seeking a variance to construct more than one structure on a single lot in this R9 zone. And at that point, that variance was granted. And fast forward to 2022, that variance was never exercised or acted upon, and a new variance was requested and I believe received in October or September of this year, August, right around there, for the addition of a structure that didn't meet code requirements and required a variance. And I believe that particular at 972, it's a like oversized garage type of thing, I believe.
So we have not heard that yet, right?
I'm sorry?
So he's
Yeah.
saying that there was a new application for 972 and that hasn't come before us yet?
There was an application for, as Attorney Jean mentioned, for 972 that they did get approval for a larger garage. So it was this summer, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it was a few months ago.
All right.
It had a
Maybe that
pool
was a meeting that I wasn't at.
and all that.
Right. No, basically, I'm not trying to convolute the issue.
Yeah.
It's just that back in 2020, an abutter of this developer came before the board
That's probably what I'm remembering.
for a variance to add a second structure to the property, and it was granted.
Okay.
But it was just never acted on, so I didn't want to lead you on. That's why I didn't list it, because I didn't want you to think, oh, geez, he's listing things that don't exist.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to, I couldn't remember exactly what it was that we had talked about, because I was familiar with this area, so, okay, thank you.
Right, and sorry, please.
No, no,
I was going to say, the Conservation Commission did a pretty thorough walk, and the developer hired a soil scientist to go out there with them to take a look at what some people, if you look at the GIS map, it is confusing because it looks like there's a stream going through the property, but there's a ditch that goes through the property, which the developer's been asked to fill in by the Conservation Commission if there's approval on this. So it's not, I mean, I don't know, it confused me, so I went back and took a look and asked people, what does this mean? And it's just an inaccurate rendering of what someone thinks is there. But the Conservation Commission did a site walk and actually made a number of recommendations for a number of areas of that property to be filled in, with the exception of keeping a particular tree on one of the bounds.
We have their letter.
Oh,
in
good,
our
it was
packet.
attached, good.
Yes, we do. Mr. Courier, sir.
Yeah, I think the letter we have from the Conservation Commission was just a recommendation, but I was just curious, you had briefly gone over there, that was this ditch the only wet, was that flagged as wet, or what was flagged as
I
wet?
think I should have the engineer speak to that because it's above my pay grade.
All right.
And if you would state your name and address, sir, for the record.
Michael Granger, MJ Granger Engineering, 220 Dairy Road, Hudson, New Hampshire. As Attorney Jean had mentioned, we had the soil scientist come out, and he flagged in that man-made ditch, there are 4 small little wetland pockets, and you can see it on the plan. And those are what the Conservation Commission says fill them in.
Okay, I guess without the notes from the Conservation, so it was fill with no mitigation? Is that what they said?
Our mitigation on that?
No, I'm sorry, was their conclusion to fill and have no mitigation? I mean, I didn't see their minutes, and I was just curious, usually when they go out, it's because there's wetlands that are flagged, and then...
Yes, they went out and they walked it, and also the planning staff walked it.
Yep.
There was a numerous amount of junk, hot water tank, old bathtub, half of foundation, half of rear end of a Ford, we think. The engine was out there in the ditch, and they requested us to remove those junk items and then fill that ditch in.
Okay, thank you. I'm all set on that.
Mr. Courier, on the back of the Conservation Commission call to order, there are some notes about this.
Okay, thanks. I guess I had another question maybe for the attorney, and that is, you had asked about, I guess an observation for me that I'd like to throw out is there's a lot of citations you have of West Hollis Street properties that are condominiumized like this. I completely agree. I mean, I probably voted on a bunch of them. I think all of those are eastbound. And I guess just my observation, I used to live in this part of West Hollis Street many years ago. And to the east of Jensen's, it's, to me, always been kind of very developed and getting more developed. You know, we have the dump, we have, and a lot of the condominiumized areas. But right at the end of Jensen's or the west end, like when you walk down into Jensen's Park, it's almost, I think there's a hill or something behind there because, you know, you just see woods. And when you walk into this little cutout of West Hollis Street, to me, that's, you know, you'd think you were in Hollis, right? You'd think it was pretty rural. And so I guess when I looked at this plan and this site, I struggle with the character of the neighborhood because it would seem to me that the character of this neighborhood is not what's, say, down by Pateri's, where a lot of these condominiumized options have been, you know, approved. And I just wondered what your thought on my thought is.
Right. So I guess on the one hand, I'm a Nashua native myself, so I won't tell you how many years, but over 60 years of living in the city. And, you know, I can go back to when much of West Hollis Street, way more than now, if you're talking about, you know, what's been developed over the years, looked like you could have been in Hollis, much as Amherst Street was way back when. This particular project doesn't have any housing until you get way back in the property. If you take a look at 126 feet of frontage, there's nothing on that 126 till you get beyond that to the open 3-some-odd acres that are back there. So if you're taking a look at going from that bend, going back, you're not going to see a whole lot of change except for the addition of a driveway, which again, in this case, is a necessity because of the prior acts.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Is Ms. Boras indicating she has questions? Okay, then thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition or with questions, comments, or concerns about this application? Please step forward, sir. State your name and address for the record.
Yes, good evening. My name is Paul Morey. I live at 164 Hayden Road in Hollis. I grew up on that property that we're talking about, so I can answer some of these questions on that ditch that they said is recommended to be filling it in. When I grew up, there was water flowing through that because where Jensen's Trailer Park is to the east of that, east of Lot 972, to that area in there used to be a small pond. It's been changed quite a bit with the when Jensen built that, regraded, and that pond was filled in. I don't know if that was legal or not, but it was filled in. And since that point, there's no water flowing through there. And that water used to be only seasonal. And I suspect that the areas where they say it's kind of wet pockets, it's because it's not a level drainage ditch, so to speak. You know, it goes down, it comes up and whatnot. Some places we used to have 3 feet of water, and other places you'd have 6 inches of water. Now, if you dug hard enough, you'd probably find some old clay tiles in there where the water was allowed to go underneath with makeshift roadway across. I say roadway for tractor or whatever going through there. So that's that question right there. See if I have any other notes on that. Now, I do have questions about the condo association, so to speak, the articles of whatever, confederation or whatever. I spoke with the lawyer who happens to be...
But, Mr. Mooney, I don't think those questions are for this board. They may be for the attorney or the planning.
Can I just make my comment, and then you can say whether it's really right or wrong or whatever? Okay, the question is, and I just spoke to the attorney, who happens to be my cousin, okay, that the association, people won't own their house. They'll just own a ability to use the property exclusively on one area. That seems like that's going around a plan for subdividing. If you have separate plots, then that turns into a subdivision. And I don't know how that affects this board, because now that's a little bit different than building 4 structures on one lot. That's saying you got to have a subdivision, and then you can put up your 4 buildings if you got a good subdivision plan. So that's putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. That was the question I had on that.
But that's not a question, sir, that this
if-
board can answer.
Okay, if this is approved as such, that road is, that driveway is a private driveway, if my understanding. But if it's not approved this way, and it goes through subdivision plan, I presume that would be a public right-of-way, a city street. That's why I'm raising these questions here. It's not just what it's plain on the paper, it's what's the intent behind the variance request, okay? It's not just 4 buildings on one lot. You're saying 4 individual private residences, but it looks like a condo, but they don't own anything. That's all I have to say.
Attorney Jean, do you want to respond to that? No, wait. Nope, I just want to see if there's any more questions. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak with questions, comments, concerns, or opposition?
I think that woman.
I don't, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Ruby McClellan, so I own 972.
I need you to speak into the mic. You need to state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Marie McClellan, and I live at 972 West Hollis Street.
And we have a letter from you.
And did everyone read it?
That's basically what
Did everyone
we
read the
do.
letter? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so the one comment I have, the lawyer made, I did ask for the usage of the lot to be used for more than one building because I needed to build another house because my house was so small. And so when it got approved, it was actually approved for a detached accessory dwelling unit. I had stipulations to use it only as a detached accessory dwelling unit, meaning that I had to live in one of those houses, and one of the houses had to be small. And my house is 816 square feet. So you know how that's small. So the garage that I just got approved for, I think it was July 23rd, was because it was percentage-wise too much bigger than my house. So pretty easy to have something bigger than 816 square feet. And so that's what that was, if people, just to refresh your memory. So I don't have, oh, I did have one question actually, about the water for the development. In some of the paperwork, it said that it was going to come from Jensen's Trailer Park. I just wondered how that would work.
I'm assuming that when all the questions have been asked, and now I'm also assuming we do not have to read this letter into the record since you are present, that the attorney will have 5 minutes to come up to respond to the questions that he's heard.
Okay, and the letter is in the record because I wrote it, you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
it is in the record.
Okay, cool. All right, great, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
just for the
sir.
record, on the plot plan, water is being supplied by Pennachuck Waterworks.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher. Yes, ma'am.
Pennachuck Waterworks. Pennachuck Water. No, Pennachuck Waterworks.
Supplies the
So
water.
we'll supply the water through their main line. So they have public water there.
All right, just to clarify,
You need to speak into the mic.
I'm sorry,
Please
thank you.
state your name and
Yes.
address again, sir.
Thank you. Colin Jean, 64 McKean Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. The water will be coming from Pennachuck Waterworks via an easement over the property of Jensen's, which has already been acquired, which is why it really simplified crossing West Hollis Street, the island, and the bend to get water to the property. So I hope that answers that question. Again, a lot of the questions relating to the declaration of condominium and how the properties are going to be owned, whether it's going to be common land ownership or exclusive use ownership of some of the property. Obviously, each house will be deeded to an individual party, either as tenants in common or joint tenants, or into a trust, or whoever ends up buying these properties if this goes through. So with that said, I think I can share fairly assuredly with Mr. Maury that it's the intention of the developer to create exclusive use zones for each house within the development. So if somebody wants to put an above-ground pool, their liability policy will cover it, and it won't be at the whim of condominium rules and regulations that, you know, no St. Patrick's Day flag can hang in our community. That's not the intention of this particular developer. It's to give people the autonomy they have on a particular 16,000 or 15,000 square feet that's being dedicated exclusively for their use, but still remaining as one lot of land. It's not terribly uncommon this day and age to have that. And I'm not sure if there were other questions that I left on the table.
Mr. Courier.
I was just curious how long the owner has owned this lot of land?
The owner purchased the property in, I think, early 2018.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yes.
And of the people who were present who had questions and concerns, the one and only one person may come up and speak after listening to the attorney, and the two people should discuss which person will come up. And again, please state your name and address for the record.
Marie McClellan, 972 West Hollis Street. I don't mind the fact of having people live there. My only concern is that it's a lot that's so wet. And I don't know, Mr. Courier, did you read the Conservation Commission's from 2018, what they wrote about that? They said that they were going to have dry wells and a pond, and I just think that the lot is, for 4 homes, is just, you know, how do you have a septic system on a quarter of an acre plus a swimming pool?
I don't see that in here.
Maybe I saw it online. 'Cause I read it online, and it just said, you know, that every lot was going to have 2 dry wells, not dry wells, they called them something else maybe, and that there was going to be a retention pond for the runoff from the driveway, and that the Conservation Commission said that they couldn't use any pesticides, herbicides, or salt on the driveways. And I thought, how can you even control something like that?
Mrs. McClellan, I have, and we all have the letter, but I just want to let you know that what it states is, Dear Mr. Hurd, your application for the above referenced project received a favorable recommendation from the Nashua Conservation Commission at their meeting on June 18th or June 6th, 2018, with the following stipulations. 1, add wetland buffer markers around the wetland areas as required under Ordinance 190-116. 2, remove and encapsulate the knotweed. 3, due to the sensitivity of the Lyle Brook critical wetland area and the location of the snow storage area, request that any snow removal company be Green Snow Pro certified. 4, no pesticides, herbicides, or salts to be applied within the wetland buffer areas. According to Ordinance 190-112, the wetland areas impacted is less than 3,000 square feet. Therefore, submittal of an application to the Zoning Board of Adjustment per NRO Section 190-114 is not required. It is the owner's responsibility to submit any required applications to state agencies as may be needed. The project can now move to the subdivision submittal process. If you have any questions about this letter or your responsibilities, please contact, and they give a name and address of someone to contact. And it is signed by Scott McPhee, the National Conservation Commission. And that is what we have from the commission itself. It lists their stipulations, but that's up to the developer, the owner. They have to comply with the Conservation Commission's stipulations, request, demands, as it were. They cannot go forward without meeting these requirements.
So is there a size house that will be built, because a septic system always depends on how many rooms you have?
I think you're
I'm just
talking
concerned
more
about the
planning
land.
questions
Yeah.
than zoning.
Yeah.
So, in honesty and truth, I think that's above our pay grade.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Wait, I have a question.
Mr. Courier?
Yeah, I have a question. In your letter, you had spoken in the first paragraph about character of the neighborhood, the quiet area. I'm just wondering, like, it doesn't surprise me to hear that, because that's what I think. I'm just curious, are the other 4 or 3 homeowners on the street, have you discussed
Well,
any?
Yeah, I spoke to the guy that lives down the end. I thought he was going to be here, but he didn't come. And he was not in favor, but, you know, kind of for different reasons than me. I'm really just concerned with the safety of the septic systems.
Okay.
You know, I grew up in Nashua, more like in between Amherst Street and Broad Street. So, I mean, I grew up on a small, my parents have a half an acre lot, and everybody is right beside us. So, I mean, I don't mind having neighbors. I'm just concerned with that it seems like a lot of houses to all have septic systems.
Okay.
And then how do you police people doing things properly with the wetland and stuff? That's my concern. I don't mind neighbors at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Poirier.
Any stormwater infrastructure would be under the planning board's purview, and they would need to be reviewed by engineering department. The Conservation Commission will often delegate one of the commissioners to check up and keep tabs on developments as they move forward and as they finish developing, to make sure that they're meeting stipulations.
Thank you. And Ms. McClellan, whatever the plan is, it's going to have to go to that planning board, and I would suggest you probably keep an eye on that. That's, unless somebody else from the board has any other suggestion, I'm going to close this public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Minkara.
I do support the application. Overall, I think the proposed use of the property is reasonable. 4 homes sited on over 3 acres of land. Condominium use on this property, I think, does make sense, more sense certainly than putting in a public road. And I do agree, we have other single-family homes sited on condominiums, but I'd also note that it's really very similar to the Jensen's mobile home park. Unless I'm incorrect, that is one large parcel with individual lease lots of single-family homes. So the character of this area is very much in line, I think, with what is proposed, and certainly that's true in terms of density. So again, overall, I support the proposal. Obviously, it would have to go to the planning board to address drainage issues, to address, the design of the driveway, and of course, it would also need a state septic approval on any of the individual septic systems. I also support the variance request for the additional driveway. The 24-foot driveway that's proposed, again, it's reasonable, it's standard. But the property is burdened by an existing 10-foot easement, so in this case, it certainly makes it distinct. Overall, I think the property, just because of its size in the area and its shape, also makes it a fairly distinct property.
Thank you. Mr. Nahili.
I'm in support of this application. I think Mr. Minkara really did a great job enunciating the reasons for that. This is an irregular shaped property with the easement. Our purpose as a zoning board is to deal with irregular shapes and issues that pop up like this. I'm very much in favor of the driveway. As far as the condominium complex, it really does fit in the character of this neighborhood. Having lived in this general area as well, these 4 houses will fit that character, and I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Mr. Courier.
I guess I don't have a concern about the condominium proposal and the driveway, the condominium ownership. I was struggling with the character of the neighborhood because, when you stand on this street or anywhere on this curved portion of West Hollis Street, you don't even see Jensen's. I'm not sure how many people did site walks, but I'm kind of familiar with this plot of land, but Jensen's, you don't see it, and when you're at Jensen's, you don't see this. And so while we haven't heard strong opposition that it's that it's opposing the character of the neighborhood, we, do have the letter from Ms. McClellan, and I guess I'm hung up with that issue, and that's what I'm hung up on.
Thank you. Ms. Boras?
I'm also in support of the application for all of the reasons that my colleagues have already mentioned.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, and I guess I'm likewise, I'm in support, and I don't really have anything else to add.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I'm also in support for the reasons spoken to, and again, just note that we haven't heard any different testimony and change of the property from the Conservation Commission side of things. So I think that's still valid, what they presented. We didn't hear anything different from the soil scientists or anybody else. So again, to me, that makes it compelling that this would meet all the criteria, and I will support the application.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel?
I support the application. I'm not really concerned about character of the neighborhood. We have this sort of taking of undeveloped land and turning it into housing all over the city. And while we would all love to have our neighboring undeveloped land stay there for perpetuity, we don't have a lot of control over that. So I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. And I also am in support of the application and the driveway. I think, especially maybe that driveway, it seems kind of crazy that you have to get a variance to use your own land to get on it. But there you have it. So now I think I would ask if somebody would care to make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Boucher, thank you, sir.
I'd like to make a motion for G. Hurd and Son Construction, LLC owner, George Hurd, manager, Company Hurd, Clegg, LLC applicant, 976 West Hollis Street, Sheet D, Lot 509, requesting the following. 1, variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17, Section B, to allow 4 principal structures on 1 lot, 1 permitted, to construct 4 single-family detached dwelling units, and 2, variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17, Section E, subsection 1, to exceed maximum driveway width 24 feet permitted, 1 10-foot wide existing driveway used by adjacent property, an additional 24 feet requested for a total width of 34 feet. It's in the R9 zone, Ward 5. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of property given a special commission's property. Again, this is a lot that is over 3 acres in size, has a unique shape. It has some conditions on the property that the National Conservation Commission has addressed in 2018, which remain the same today. We find that the individual houses that are being proposed on this property will fit into this area, and that the variance for the 10-foot existing driveway to access a property in the rear is reasonable. We find that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. We find it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. We find it's not contrary to public interests. We find that substantial justice will be served. Again, I also note that there are 4 stipulations from the June 6, 2018 National Conservation Commissions, which we are attaching to this approval of this variance. So again, I make a motion to approve the area variance.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw, for your second. Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes not in favor of the motion to approve.
Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. That is a 4-1 vote. Attorney Jean, Mr. Hurd, congratulations. Your variances have been granted. Thank you for your presentation this evening. As we have stated all evening, Anyone has the opportunity to appeal any decision made by this board. They have 30 days with which to do so. And should you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please refer back to either Mr. Carter Falk or Ms. Kate Poirier in the Planning Department. Again, thank you for your detailed presentation. And Mrs. McClellan, I would follow now into the planning, watch their schedule. That's the next phase, and Mr. Mooney, that's the next phase of this. Thank you. Are they on Zoom? Yes. Okay, thank you. Harland H. and Jessica Wells, owners, 5 Boulevard Drive, Sheet A, Lot 603, requesting variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17E1 to exceed maximum driveway width 24 feet permitted, 24 feet existing, requesting to maintain additional 12-foot wide driveway on opposite side of house for a total width of 36 feet. This is in the RA Zone, Ward 7. If there's somebody here, could you please state your name and address for the record?
Hi, my name is Jessica Wells, and my address is 5 Boulevard Drive in Nashua, New Hampshire.
Thank you, Jessica. The floor is now yours.
Hello, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm raising 2 very small children, so they kind of had to come first here, but yet here I am. So my husband and I were going to rearrange our driveway, our main driveway that we have that you can see attached to a 2-car garage that is located more towards the left of the house in this picture, and getting that redone because it was not leveled. What we did, we hired Stan's Paving, which came in and gave us a quote and an estimate of the initial driveway and fixing that. While having the conversation as well, we were aligning on the right side of the house to have a plot to put things for our children. Have a basketball hoop. My husband does have a boat that he does put there on the off seasons, but just as another slab of land. Not calling it a driveway, not just another paved area, which could also not have the boat sink into the ground, which could cause other things within time. But we were thinking about, well, let's go ahead and put it on this slab. Stan's Paving, again, stated that they got the approvals through Nashua, that everything went through, and they proceeded as going. We signed the contract, we put it all into their hands. They said because it's not cutting the sidewalk, my apologies, is that's why it's not considered a driveway. So we honestly, and this can be bad on myself and my husband's name, but that is what we did and trusted this company when we signed this contract. We were then presented with this information from Nashua stating that this was a variance application that needed to be filled, and if we knew that this was going to be a thing, we wouldn't have possibly have gone through with it at all. So we're trying to just make up and be honest citizens here for the city of Nashua that this was not an intentional go behind someone's back. We trusted Stan's Paving for this. In terms of the appeal of the house, it doesn't diminish any kind of property value. We actually just had the entire siding done on our home, along with a brand new roof to help with the appearance of the home, and it did increase our property value over $100,000. This is also directly on our property line. It does not impede on any of the neighbors next to us. Our neighbor to the right, if you're looking in this picture as well, does have a substantial driveway as well. So it's kind of matching in terms of the size. So I don't have a fancy presentation in a PowerPoint form, but I do hope that was relevant enough to show that we were using this to store things that we have on the side in a very respectable manner, and also give our children, who again are very young, they're 8 and 6, have a place to play as well, because being one house away from Main Street is a very busy road, so this gives us another play area for our children.
Thank you. Does
You're
anyone
welcome.
have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none. There's no one in the room, so there's no one here to speak in favor. Is there anyone else on Zoom who would care to speak? There's no one else on Zoom. Okay, so then there is no one here and no one on Zoom to speak with questions, comments, concerns, or opposition, or in
Actually,
favor?
I have a question for the applicant.
Oh, okay.
Of course.
In your presentation just now, and thank you for that, you were saying that if you had known or if Stans had informed you that this wasn't a legal option, did you say you wouldn't have pursued it?
I would have gone through the necessary steps first of like putting in an application before it's actually was put on my land, before going forward with that. I apologize if that was unclear. We still love it, but we wanted to obviously do things right the first way.
Okay. I guess that was it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Nahili.
I'd like to start with a question. Who's responsible for a curb cut? If we were to go forward with this and treat this as a driveway, who does the curb cut? Does the city have to do the curb cut?
Typically, the city engineering department would have to approve a curb cut. I think the issue here is that the paving is within the city right-of-way. Is that correct?
It's actually wider than the 24 feet that's allowed. I mean, our staff considers it a driveway, and there's also an issue of the curb there, as Mr. Nahili mentioned. So cars or vehicles have to drive up over that curb and over a public sidewalk to get to it.
Madam Chair. This was brought to our attention by the city surveyor, Mark Jennings, who works for the Division of Public Works. Engineering Department is the one who would issue a curb cut permit, a street opening permit. The current issue is that they have a boat that is driving over the curb and over the sidewalk, which over time will damage it. They would need to put in a curb cut to not damage the sidewalk anymore.
So it's the curb cut we're really interested in. Is that what you're saying? Because from the photo, it leaves the grassy area. They didn't put the asphalt over that. They left that. Okay.
So, yeah, I guess I was unclear on that. So what is being asked is to actually extend that existing driveway and create
No.
another curb cut. That's the request?
That has not been requested.
I didn't
No,
think
no,
so
no,
either.
that's not, sorry, that's not the request. I'm not
Okay.
sure if I'm allowed to say anything. I'm Jessica Wells. I live at 5
Madam
Below
Chair.
Drive, Nashua, New
She-
Hampshire.
no,
I'm trying to run a
We have to open it up
We,
if you want to hear.
we would have to reopen this. We understand based on your application what your request is.
Okay.
We also now are listening to the definitive rationale for this city and the logic around coming up and over that curb. But this right now is the section or the time frame where only the board we're deliberating amongst ourselves. So you're going to hear us go back and forth just like you would go back and forth with someone. That's what we're doing right now.
I was just clarifying that was my understanding, that we are here, what is sought is what's actually proposed and shown here.
Correct. Mr. Falk.
That's correct. You know, the variance is to exceed the 24 feet in width, and should this board approve this, then they would have to get a street opening permit through DPW to have that curb opening, so that vehicles can drive straight onto a paved surface instead of going over the curb.
Okay.
'Cause
But, I
that
mean,
does,
once again, my understanding is that that's not what's being requested, that would be
and
outside
it's
the
not-
scope of what's being proposed.
Right, and that's not, from what I think he just said, is that if this is granted, then the next step for the homeowner is to then go to engineering and the DPW. That's then what they would do. Is that correct, Mr. Falk?
the sidewalk is not on their property, that grass area is not their property, and neither is the curb. So they paid from their property line going back. That part is an extension of the 24 feet that's allowed. They have 24 feet of their driveway that goes to their garage. This is an additional 12 feet. The request is to exceed the 24 feet in width. Should this board approve this, then it goes to the DPW. They are going to have to look at plans to have a curb cut opening or street opening, so vehicles can drive not over a curb, like they're not supposed to access this driveway. It's going to have to be an opening that they can drive straight onto their new paved area. That's what the request is.
Okay, so,
Would we be in order to make a stipulation that they have to have a curb cut granted, or would we simply, assuming that we voted in favor of the 12-foot additional, and would basically leave it up to the homeowner to duke it out with engineering?
Well, engineering is well aware of this request, and they will require a curb cut opening. They will not allow this to stay as is. So,
Okay, but that's
has to
not
go to
in our
that's,
DPW.
no, that's.
They were well aware that this is going to this board tonight, and they're well aware that the owner would have to do some kind of an opening to access this driveway.
Okay.
So they will know all about it.
But the curb cut does not concern us.
Correct.
Okay.
But it's something that they would have to do, but not through the zoning board.
Right. But DPW is on notice.
Yes.
Okay. Is that clear, everyone?
No, this is variance requested on the front page, says second driveway. I don't know any driveways that don't have a curb cut. So
That's what they'd have to do.
From my perspective, they're looking for a second driveway here. This isn't to park a boat or have a basketball court. This is a second driveway. It's got to be a curb cut. I appreciate why they did it. When I look at the big picture, I do know this neighborhood. I'm not aware of any of the houses that have second driveways in that area. I would not, at this time, I have some questions. And Mr. Courier always says it seems to say it pretty well. He's got some questions. So I'm not sure that I could favorably vote on this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lionel?
Yeah, it is a problem. We certainly have had requests for an additional paved area on the side of the house, but the fact that they paved this to the sidewalk, which I think part of it is also not on their property. The property line probably starts a little bit farther in from where the sidewalk is, and then doesn't go to the street. It's a problem. I mean, we could grant the additional 12 feet, but the homeowner would still have to get DPW to agree for them to do a curb cut, so they'd have some additional construction to do. The alternative is, as is stated in one of the letters in the application, that they would have to have it all ripped up and refilled in with loam and reseeded. I'm not really comfortable with the application as it is.
Thank you. Mr. Minkara?
I really can't support the application. I don't see anything, distinct about the property. This isn't a case where it's difficult to access the garage. We've seen those kinds of arguments before. But this is, this isn't asking for a little bit wider or a taper or a flare to get into a third bay. This is a whole additional driveway. The lots in this area are not particularly large. And so to me, that's concerning, and I just don't see, I understand that it exists and that taking it up would be a hardship, at least financially, but I just can't use justification for allowing a second driveway on this lot or in this area.
Thank you. Ms. Boras?
I'm also not in support of the application.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I have a question, Mr. Falk. In this area, we got to be back how many feet from the sidewalk before we could do anything, put any type of surface down? Is it 10 feet or 20 feet? What is
RA
it?
zone, the front yard setback is 25 feet
25 feet.
from the front property line.
So that's almost going back to the house. Okay. The only challenge I saw in this property was on the left side. you know, again, the houses are not, the lots are not square to the street, so, you know, I looked at this again. So I don't know if there's enough room to put the boat to the left or the left garage, so to say, as you're speaking, as you're looking at the house. I don't know if there's room there. I could see where if we need to access the garage, if the boat stays outside, we need to access the garage. I don't know how many cars they have. I guess could have been some questions to ask. So I could see a need for maybe a pad to put the boat on. But again, I think that the issue is, I mean, we all know that, you know, whether or not we drive over our curb or we drive over in the driveway and over our front lawn, I don't know if that's precluded, and I know that people will access their property and however they can to store vehicles in the side of the yard, back of the yard. So I guess, again, I'm a little indifferent to this one. I could see the need for placing the boat on a pad to, again, the reason that people do this with campers and stuff is, as we've seen in other applications of the city, where people have become creative, is, again, the moisture from the ground will rust and rot anything that's steel. So that's why, you know, we park on pavement, right, or cement. So I can see that part of it, but right now, I guess I can understand that there's been some cost incurred. It's not the reason why I would vote for or not, but I'm indifferent still.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I think this seems like a unfortunate situation, but I can't find support for it.
Thank you. Mr. Courier?
You know, when I have, or we are saying, speaking for myself, like an after-the-fact approval, I always take a look at it, well, what if it wasn't done and it was just being asked for in the proper order? A lot of times, off the cuff, I'd say more than half of the time, I find support for an after-the-fact. And say in the case of a driveway, maybe there's, you know, a steep slope and the person wanted to pave a part that's not so steep, or this or that, or there's a tree or something. And so the homeowner, maybe not knowing they need to get a permit, does something, and, you know, they get caught and it comes here, but there's rationale for it, right? And so we certainly heard the rationale for this, but if this were not done, and the case was before us, I wouldn't be finding support for it. I think mainly spoken by the law that Mr. Mancara spoke to, which is it's not distinctive, there's not a clear reason, there's no property, there's nothing distinctive about this property that would warrant the 12 feet of overage. The need to park a boat or an RV is not inherent with the property, but with the owner. And so I don't think it meets the letter of the law. I mean, certainly I was like, ooh, wow, when I usually do my site walks early on, and I did the site walk long before the package came in, and all I see is, okay, 24 feet and an extra 12 feet, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a driveway there, it's done, and there's a boat sitting on it, you know? This is definitely an after the fact, and, you know, then I get the application. But, I mean, I have to note in the application that the homeowners testifying that they were assured by Stans that this is okay. Well, it's not okay, it's not permitted. Well, I mean, every contractor is going to have general liability insurance, so I'm certainly sensitive to a homeowner having to pay something, but my gut says it's not on the homeowner, it's on Stans who've been around forever. And so, I mean, that I just wanted to throw that out there also, that you know, the testimony we have before us is it's a contractor problem. And I don't see it as unique in the property. So, I mean, it's a long way of getting around to saying I don't find support for the application.
Thank you. I think I'm like Mr. Boucher. I'm a little bit indifferent. I see the pros and cons. I could see something like Mr. Boucher was alluding to go all the way in the back so the boat could be there, but if you have to go 25 feet back, you're all the way back. And there's that. So I guess I'm A little bit country and a little bit rock and roll. I'm just indifferent. And do we need to discuss this more, or should we ask for a motion? I guess I asked for a motion. Would somebody care to make a motion? Nobody cares. Oh, should I let Mr. Courier win?
I was stepping up because I guess no one else
I think
was,
Mr. Shaw was doing the same thing, but your hand went up about a nanosecond ahead of his.
I guess I'll make a motion. I'm going to make a motion to deny the request for the 12-foot wide driveway. I think at least the majority of the board finds that the variance isn't needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. I think the board finds that there aren't special conditions associated with the property that warrant the overage of the driveway. I think the board finds that the spirit and intent of the ordinance is not being kept in good faith to permit the 12-foot overage. I think the board doesn't have any data one way or the other on the effect of property values impacted by this request. I think the board finds that the request is contrary to the public interest and substantial justice is not served to the applicant by granting this request. So with that, again, in summary, I make a motion to deny.
And Mr. Shaw, thank you very much, sir, for your second. Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor of the motion to deny.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. That is 5-0, it's unanimous. I'm sorry, Ms. Wells, your variance has been denied. And any decision by this board can be appealed by anybody. There's 30 days with which to do so. Should you have any questions, comments, concerns, please re-refer back to either Mr. Carter Falk or Ms. Kate Poirier in the Planning Department. Again, thank you for your application. However, the board has denied the request this evening.
Thank you for your time.
Excuse me?
Said thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes that part of the business, the meeting business of the meeting.
Minutes.
Do we have?
No, we didn't.
No, we don't have any minutes. I did not see any minutes. There's
Were we
no
supposed to?
motion for
September
rehearing,
14th.
no minutes. So I guess,
We'll do them at the next meeting.
okay, that's fine.
Well, the,
Does anyone
agenda for the
see
next
any,
meeting.
we have the agenda for November 9th. Does anybody see any regional impact?
No.
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 No regional impact is seen by any member. Mr. Clerk?
Yes, I see no regional impact also.
Yep. And we kept
the meeting dates for next,
meeting, do we have them?
Yeah, this is in the back of
should be there.
the sign.
Oh,
Should be
okay.
behind the
And this
maps.
would be the second time that the board has seen them.
And so now we also have the bylaws, and we have everybody
Bylaws
here.
is also the second time for that, too.
So it would be this. We have to determine, or we need a motion to accept the dates and then a motion to accept the bylaws, correct? Okay, and we have all of us here, so makes sense to do this. Does anybody want to make a motion on the dates? Do they see any conflicts? Excuse me.
Is September 12th possibly if would we be due for a mayoral election in '23?
Yes,
And that
we
could be
are.
But that isn't in September. I think we only do that in November, don't we?
No,
Yeah, but
if there's more than.
If there's more than one, there could be a
Oh,
primary.
there could be a
Yeah,
primary.
yeah, so I think that would be the date it would be, so I think,
Yeah,
I
you
think
could
that,
be.
I think that's when it would happen, if
Yeah,
we have a
second.
mayoral.
Yeah, yep.
primary.
So.
We can, the board also has the option to change a meeting date,
Yeah. Within
this
reason.
summer or
Yeah.
next summer also.
Because we would know, I think,
Well in advance.
Yeah,
by
we-
June, I think,
Yeah,
or roughly,
Yeah.
so we'd have plenty of time to.
We have
react.
plenty
There's
of time to adjust.
a date.
Okay.
And as long as the applicants know and the board knows and we put it on the website and all of our locations at City Hall, I think it'll be fine, but.
Well, if we knew by June, that's
should be
like
able to
so
take-
many months ahead of
Sure,
time.
yeah.
I think we would be good. We would be within our
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
comfort zone. So given that,
Want to make a motion?
yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the draft of the Nashua City Zoning Board 2023 meeting and deadline dates as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lionel, for your second, and that was Mr. Boucher. Okay. Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Okay, that's unanimous. Those have been accepted.
Did you vote?
Oh, yeah, oh. You know what, I checked myself off. I vote in favor. Nice catch, Mr. Lionel. The bylaws. Have we read the bylaws?
It's not, it wasn't in this packet, but it's in the
It's in
previous
the last
packets.
It's been in previous packets. It wasn't in this one. I just keep carrying them around. Did somebody need to see them? I do have them. Yeah, I think we all probably have. In fact, I have 2 copies.
It was just 9A was added to the bylaws, that was it.
9A is the ZBA timeline per HB 1661, Section 74. The board has 90 days to begin consideration and approve or disapprove of an application unless the applicant agrees to an extension. If the board determines that it lacks sufficient information to make a final decision on an application and the applicant does not consent to an extension, the board may deny the application without prejudice, allowing the applicant to reapply at a later date for the same relief. And that is it. That was our only change,
That's consistent
correct?
with HB 1661.
Well, yeah, 1661 is changing everything.
Just makes it a little clearer, so.
Mr. Shaw, would you care to make a
I
motion?
move to approve the bylaws with the amended change.
I think I'll second that. Mr. Shaw, how do you vote?
Mr. Shaw votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. It's unanimous. So we've accepted the changes and the dates. But
Motion to adjourn?
we have the motion to adjourn. I can tell you, though, that on June 27th, I won't be here. It'll be my 36th wedding anniversary. I'm not going to be here.
But you'll be here for Valentine's Day? Because we have a meeting on Valentine's Day.
Do we have a meeting on Valentine's Day? Oh, and we've
It
already
wasn't
accepted
seconded or
it.
voted on.
Oh, my God.
I think we just can make a statement, right?
I think so, too.
Yeah. So we adjourn.
Yes, we're adjourned at
10 o'clock.
9:59. And
Good night.
good night.
Thanks, Estathia.
So that means that